amount of money being invested in the Scotland district at any one time in this country's history. And this is against a background and in a context where the country is still reeling from a global pandemic. This is in a situation where the global outlook, the economic global outlook, still looks bleak. But this government saw it fit to invest in a part of this country which has been for too long neglected. Now, I will be the first to admit, Mr. Speaker, that the construction of roads in the Scotland district it's challenging. It's not as easy as other parts of Barbados. We know that. I'm also well aware that slippage and the washing away of roads and soil erosion and all such like is nothing new to the people of St. Andrew. In fact, we are accustomed to that. I had a conversation just last night. I was talking to an elderly gentleman, and he was explaining to me that when he was a young boy growing up in St. Andrew, that the road that leads from Sturgis there in St. Thomas goes down Banana Hole and down into Duke's Gap and those places down into Springvale, Plantation Yard. That road will wash away every single year. Every year during the rainy season, you can expect that road will wash away. That was the reality that people in the Scotland district would have faced for many years. And that continued right up until 1995, I believe it was, when under the tenure of the former member for St. Andrew, a serious examination was made of that road, and the road it was closed at that point. That people felt, Springvale Road, that people felt should be abandoned, that people felt could not be rehabilitated or fixed. Through a combination of local knowledge and the engineering experts in the Ministry of Public Works, that road was rehabilitated. And this is almost 30 years now that road is still holding. 30 years. Yes, it's a little wavy now, more so than it was in the initial stages, but it's still holding together. Which says to me that any road in the Scotland district can be rehabilitated. Because there's some, even within that district, who believe that roads or money invested in the Scotland district is not a good investment. People all over Barbados, they say that, even within the Scotland district. And that is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. I'm not surprised because it is alleged that a former Prime Minister of this country, who incidentally was the representative of a part of Barbados that a small portion of it falls into the Scotland district, is alleged to have said that the only thing that you can do, or that he would do with the Scotland district, is to rail it round and let go of cows down there to live. Allegedly. And that is a perception that some held for a while, but what I've seen between now and then is that there's a glaring difference between the approach of this current administration and those previous administrations that didn't see the value of the Scotland district. We have a government now and a leader that is committed to the full rehabilitation of not only St. Andrew, but St. Joseph, St. Thomas, the little part of St. Peter that falls into the Scotland district. We often forget that Renata, Cherry Tree Hill, that that's part of St. Peter, and it's part of the Scotland district. St. John, St. Joseph. I find it interesting, to say the least, that persons would not have seen the value of this place, but this government has seen the value. They've seen the importance. And I'm going to get to it eventually, where we're going to speak to the people who live in these spaces. But I just want to speak to the infrastructural development and what this government is doing right now for the hardworking, law-abiding citizens, residents of St. Andrew. Law-abiding residents who have been forced over the years to be creative. We've had to use a level of creativity to just to commute and walk around our communities, trek through our communities because of the poor road infrastructure. You have to walk through gullies, make tracks, make bridges. All through St. Andrew, you would hear about makeshift bridges that were built over the years so that persons could just get around the Scotland district. That's the difficulty that we face living in those parts. Yes, it's all right to visit. Sometimes I smile because I said it before and I'll say it again. It's one thing to visit the Scotland district. And it's one thing to admire even the bad roads, because I've come to realize that some people expect that there should be bad roads, or there would be bad roads in those parts of the country. But for us who have to reside in those parts, it's not a mere inconvenience. It borders on sufferation. So even though sometimes I say that people are inconvenienced, what it really means is that people are suffering. And the people in the Scotland district have suffered long and suffered hard over the years because of this neglect. The roads in St. Thomas, the roads in St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. John are some of the worst right across Barbados. I know one person would expect that I would speak to St. Andrew and say that they're the worst, but in actual fact, I have found that the roads in St. Thomas are horrible. I know that the Honourable member for St. Thomas spoke to her roads, but I had the misfortune of traveling through St. Thomas just a few weeks ago and was shocked at the conditions of the roads in, I think it was Hangman Hill, I think she said, the Honourable member. So I'm glad to see that this investment is coming at a time where persons are in a heightened sense of fear because we're in the hurricane season. You know, we have all the inconveniences that are faced right across Barbados, but we have that added fear of our homes actually slipping into the gullies. Imagine you're home and you hear that creaking noise. And when you look, your house is whistling going into the gully behind you. These are the things that we would have seen just last year during the freak storm and during Hurricane Elsa, where we actually had to move persons out of parts of the Scotland district because their homes, sometimes the homes move, or sometimes all the land behind their homes slipped away. Where they had 10, 15 feet of land behind there, they got out one morning and they saw just 2 or 3 feet, inches from their foundation. These are the realities faced by people living in the Scotland district. These are the hardships faced by people living in the Scotland district. So when we get a project like this coming to us, when we see roads like this coming to us, it means something special to the people in the Scotland district. What it does, it brings us on par. On par. Yes, it's costly, but it brings us on par with the rest of Barbados as it relates to infrastructure. That's all. We're not asking for more than anybody else. We're not even expecting more than anybody else. We just want the same conditions that everybody else in Barbados enjoys. Same conditions. And I think that is what the member who went before me, because you cannot speak about St. Andrew, Scotland, without speaking of the former member, George Payne. You can't. Because As some would word, he was a voice in the wilderness for years, lobbying and fighting and crying out for the people in White Hill especially, but by extension, the people in all of the Scotland district. And I, Ramel, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, will, in the same vein, with every fibre of my body, fight for the living conditions, improve living conditions for the people in St. Andrew for as long as they will have me. He went beyond what is expected of him, and I will go beyond what is expected of me to ensure the amelioration or the improvement of the living conditions of people in St. Andrew. And he was very interested in White Hill, and I'm going to speak to White Hill as a special case. White Hill, now this year will be 8 years that the people of White Hill had to endure the inconvenience of a broken away road. We call it the breakaway up there in St. Andrew. I remember a time when people actually had to trek through a gully, a dark gully, to get home, just to get home. Children could not get to school because the buses were not coming up there because the road was broken away at the top and the road was broken away at the bottom. And it was difficult for any vehicle to get through there. And there was always this concern that, what if something were to happen to somebody in that area? Emergency vehicles would not be able to get to them. Unfortunately, that came to pass. So that's why I'm glad to see that this government is prioritizing and pushing forward with the effort to connect White Hill back into Hillaby. But that's where it broke away from. And we have a situation now where persons who live 5 and 10 minutes apart can no longer visit the homes of their neighbors because they will have to drive 40 minutes just to see the neighbor. 40 minutes. Because they cannot trek through that track. Yes, it has been improved in the last few years or so. We have done in the Ministry of Public Works that would have used the young workers from the ASH program, came down there and they placed a handrail, they put some blocks and made some steps to ensure that people could at least walk up there safely. And that's good. But it's still not good enough for a number of the elderly within that community who still would not risk walking up to that track, because it's still kind of steep. So that's why I'm happy to know that it is being prioritized. Now, it puts me in a funny position because I sit in the ministry that has the solutions to all the problems that exist in White Hill and by extension in parts of St. Andrew, most of the problems. Transportation problems that they have, the water problems that they have, the road problems that they have, and to some extent the erosion problems that they have. They all fall under the ministry to some extent. I know some would fall under the soil, but for the most part they fall under the Ministry of Public Works. So I'm in that invidious position where I know what's in the pipeline, but at the same time, I feel the frustration of the people in those areas, especially in White Hill. And there's some who will argue that to invest money in White Hill, given that it would have broken away before and may very well break away again, it's a waste of money. But I disagree, because this is not even about White Hill alone. This is about creating linkages, connectivity within the St. Andrew area. Those who live along Trail Path, Friendship, Baxter will tell you that White Hill Road served as a link road into the commercial spaces, into St. Thomas, into Warrens, into Welch's, into Whole Town. And now persons will have to travel all the way around Belle Plaine, in some cases all the way around Fard Hill to get into those areas. So you now have a much longer commute, getting from St. Joseph or St. Thomas, St. John, into St. James or other parts of St. Thomas and St. Michael. So it acts as a link road. It's not just for the people, whether it be 200 people or 300 people living in White Hill is a link road that connects a community, that connects us to our brothers and sisters down in Baxter's, that connects us to our brothers and sisters in Sturgis, in Chapman Lane. Our brothers and sisters from Dart Hole, that road connects us. So it's more than just people. So that's why it's even more important, even more urgent that we get that connectivity back in St. Andrew, because that road did not only divide area, it divided the community. It didn't just break away, it divided Hillaby from White Hill. There were people who used to go to church and would just walk across the breakaway. I noticed that the church in White Hill is closed. It may be closed because persons can no longer make the commute. I suspect that is part of the reason. I don't see another reason. I don't see churches closed in communities. Hardly ever you find a brand new church that's in good condition closed in a community. But here it is, we had a church closed in the community. I suspect it had a lot to do with the fact that people cannot make what was just a 5-minute walk anymore. It knows a 40-minute drive. So you can see the sort of effect it's having on the community. It's killing the community. It's killing it. It's killing the community spirit. And you see evidence of that all over St. Andrew, but more so you see it in White Hill. And since I'm on that side of St. Andrew for the time being, let me just speak a little bit about the dislocation and that would have resulted from the closed bridges, because I know that those bridges in St. Andrew that were closed were a source of frustration for many a person, not only St. Andrew people, but St. Thomas people as well, St. Joseph people, who had then to travel far distances just to get round back into St. Michael in some cases. And the bridge in Bordens, let me start with that one because that provides me with good news to report. That bridge was closed, and I would admit I was a little upset when it got closed. And just to make it clear that it's not the minister or the parliamentary secretary or anybody like that in ministry who's responsible for closing bridges. That job falls to the chief technical officer. That's a technical decision. We are not the ones who close bridges to inconvenience. If it was up to me, I would have left it open. But if it was up to me. But I take advice from those with technical skills and the know-how to determine what is dangerous and what is safe. And it was believed after examination of that bridge in Bordens that it was no longer safe for residents, for motorists to be traveling on that bridge. That it was just a matter of time before that bridge failed. Now, you know that persons would say that those cracks were there for the last 20 years, but the reality is that what will happen in a year is happening in a day. That bridge would have been there for 20 years, and when one morning when the school bus is coming over with the full of Allen school children, the bridge collapsed. Or that 5 o'clock bus bringing home people back to St. Andrew, the bridge collapsed. And we would have had a tragedy, mass tragedy on our hands. And we could not, as a responsible government, as a responsible ministry, as a responsible minister, could not allow that bridge to remain open for a single day longer. Now you got the cussing. Now you got the cussing that came afterwards when we had to try to get a bus system to accommodate persons in that area, even though it meant that the buses will have now to travel a much further distance and cause people even more inconvenience. I took the cussing, but I knew that it was necessary to save lives and limbs. I knew I would rather somebody cuss me because they get home at 7 o'clock when they cuss and get home at 5 o'clock. Then I have to go down in Belle Plaine in St. Andrew's Parish Church to a funeral or a mass funeral because persons fall down a bridge collapsing and kill people in St. Andrew. I would have rather that any day to be cussed. Continue to cuss me. But I know it's gonna end soon. Because the work to repair that bridge has started. And I assumed that everybody in St. Andrew knew that. But I was in St. Simon's over the weekend and discovered that everybody didn't know that the bridge had started. They know the bridge was closed, but nobody knew that the bridge has started. So I'm telling you now, Barbados, and those who hear my voice, that the work has started. We have demolished the old structure, and we're in the process of building up what would be, I guess, the abutments, the two walls that hold, that support the weight of the bridge. So that, I guess that's the next step involved in building the bridge. I'm not an engineer. I'm speaking as a layman here now, but I based on my own understanding of what is being done on there, abutment walls we built, and on that we will lay the temporary bridge that we have already in house to place in that area to facilitate travel over there. So, and then I'm told that it's going to take a 6 to 8 week period for that whole process to be done. So I can shoulder the casting right now, because I know better is going to come. I know soon that persons will be able to travel to and fro through that area of Bordens as they were before. It's going to come. You see, even though it puts me in an invidious position, I am happy because I know what's in the pipeline. I know what is being discussed in the ministry here on a weekly basis. I know the efforts that are being made to ensure that work is started and completed in the St. Andrew area. I know the difficulties that we face. I heard the discussions about the geotechnical studies, all the different studies that are required to build in those areas, because in some cases you can't find rock. People who build houses in Scotland District know that they have a difficulty that is not faced by those of us from town. Because we dig 2 or 3 feet, we find rock. In some cases, you could dig 10 feet, 20 feet in St. Andrew, you ain't finding no rock. There's no rock. We have to be more creative and more innovative when you build in those parks. And the same thing applies to the roads. A little bit more effort is required when building a road in the Scotland District. So even though I empathize, and I sympathize with the constituents and with the residents of St. Thomas and St. Andrew, because not only St. Andrew people use Borden Bridge, all kind of people come into St. Andrew every single weekend. I was there this weekend. I saw the mud dogs. They came down there, and good luck for me. I got carried away in my vehicle and drove into some sand, and the guys came together and they helped pull me out. And we had a good little laugh afterwards, and that was a beautiful experience. And people come from all over. People come all over all over Barbados. They come to St. Andrew to enjoy what we have in St. Andrew. You understand? They come, they enjoy our beaches, they enjoy our rugged terrain. We see that. So those bridges are not just for us in St. Andrew or for us in Scotland District. Those people from Christchurch and other parts of Barbados that come just to feel something different. They experience something different. In their own little tiny Barbados, they can experience a completely different world. A beautiful, pristine, garden-like parish. That's what we are creating down there. And St. Andrew, as people drive through St. Andrew, they're going to see a little difference. They're going to see a lot of the bush and all those trees are being cleared away. And that area is being beautified. Because St. Andrew is going to be returned to its pristine look, a more manicured look, beautiful look. And I think that is going to augur well for us as we go forward, along with this connectivity that people will soon be experiencing. I actually remember when the roads in St. Andrew were good in the 1990s. We would leave in St. James and drive and ride down on our bicycles all the way down Turnsaw Hill. Sometimes in the handing. We were young and that was fun for us back then. You know, you can't risk that now. You know, those roads alone will throw you away. But as I said, I see what is in the pipeline. And the work has started. Yes, for many of us, we do not see work as being started until we see the bulldozer and the excavator and the tractor come and push away the road, and it starts like that. But there's a lot of technical work, preparatory work that goes in before you start the digging. And all over St. Andrew, I'm sure in parts of St. Joseph as well, you're seeing personnel from Complant in your communities People are seeing personnel in their communities surveying their roads. I was in St. Andrew, they told me they saw them in St. Simon's, they saw them in Babylon Road, which interestingly enough is a road that, if what people tell me I'm to believe, has not been touched in over 40 years. Over 40 years. Babylon Road has deteriorated to is now a mixture of potholes and maybe a little bit of Barbara Green between the potholes, but it's gotten that condition. But that road is one of the roads that is earmarked for repairs. And the people of Babylon, St. Andrew, who have been complaining for so many years, in short time will see a newly refurbished road in their community. That's something that I am extremely proud about. And the other road that they are complaining about a lot is Coggins, which I share with the honourable member for St. Joseph. He would tell you that nothing significant has been done to that road since 1972, when the bridge was repaired. And that bridge remained down for almost 4 years before it was repaired, in 1972. And since that road was left to fall into a state of decay, where I personally don't prefer to drive on it, but I know that persons are forced to drive on it to get home on a daily basis. And that has to come to end. We should have the same privilege to drive on nice, smooth roads like the rest of Barbados. And that is what we are working towards. That is exactly what we are working towards. Not only the main roads, not the main arteries that one would suspect would be for the benefit of the tourists, the tourist element. No, a number of these roads are community roads where hard-working, ordinary folk live. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of the roads are community roads. When you combine that with the short road project that's gonna roll out soon, where even the little tracks are gonna be rehabilitated and fixed, so you will not have to go through. I've seen it for the first time in my life. I went to St. Lucia, where you have to come down. You go by the bus stop, and you see 5 or 6 slippers laying off by the bus stop. I saw it, and I didn't know why that was the case. And when I stood there long enough, I realized that when people come home from work, they have to take off their working shoes, slip their feet into the slippers, and then they could then climb up the track to their homes. No, not in Barbados. No. So all those roads, all those little side roads, I think we're going to work on paving those roads, making those roads suitable for any person to walk on. You don't have to run the risk of destroying your shoes. You don't have to walk with 2 pairs of shoes. That is nonsense. So as I said, I know what's in the pipeline. I know what's coming. And I'm pleased and comforted by that knowledge. But I want to speak a little bit now.
I remember you're right, a little bit. Continue. You say you want to speak a little bit.
There. Yes. I just want to look at...
I mean that you're correct as it relates to a little bit. As it relates to time, you see?
Okay. Just a little bit about, some of the things that I have seen that would have happened as, certain benefits that would accrue on a personal level to those residents in Scotland District, on a personal level. Yes, we're talking about roads, but roads have an impact on people's lives. Right now, as it is, if you're taking a bus home and St. Andrew, you have to get home at 7 o'clock, that's less time you have to spend with your family. Maybe you open those roads and that 2-hour ride becomes a half-an-hour ride or a 40-minute ride. That is more time that a person has to spend with the family at home. Thank you. The family at home, with the children. These little things that we take for granted. These are the things that we take for granted. People who take that commute now because of the broken down bridges can't enjoy. They don't know. They don't know how it feels to come home outside it's still bright. Come home outside it's dark every single day. It's strange. Some people cannot imagine it. You get home, all you have to battle with is 5 o'clock rush hour traffic. We have that traffic and then a 2-hour commute after that. So these little things, yes, they may be infrastructural, but they impact the home. They impact the household. In that sense, of course, we would not want to be responsible for the destruction of these brand new electric buses that we have here on island. Our roads are such that they destroy our cars. Certainly my car, sounding a bit shackly as a result of my regular commute into St. Andrew. I'm sure that the Honourable Member for St. Thomas has a similar situation. But we would not want to be responsible for destroying those buses. And one of the things I think will also come from this here too, just know that we are on buses, is that with the dislocation that came from the closure of the Bordens Bridge and the Thompson Bridge, is that the buses were forced to go through different routes. And oftentimes what happens is that sometimes even after we open those bridges, those roads, when we see that there's that need in those communities and people grow accustomed to the buses coming into those communities, then sometimes the bus continues. So I suspect that in St. Andrew that some of the routes that the bus is now taking will continue even after we open the roads, and persons who would have had to walk a little distance to get to their house or maybe walk in the darkness, because that is also an issue down there at night, may have now a bus that will come through their gap when for years it never did. And of course, this project will bring jobs. I know that at some point, the personnel from Complant would have to set up somewhere in the Scotland district. And yes, they may be self-sufficient, as they are, but I know that they will have to buy things and acquire services from people within the surrounding communities. I know that there are things they're going to need. They're not going to have everything to hand with this setup, and even after that, they may still acquire things from people in the community. So this will provide opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities for persons living in that Scotland district. So that those knock-on effects that the Honourable Member did not mention, but believe me, are going to be part of this whole package. They're going to engage with us in the community. I suspect they will learn a little bit about our culture. They will probably, at some point, you will see them in our various watering holes, our various attractions. I sense that they will immerse themselves into the Scotland district, because it's different. They might have been in Christ Church, but where they are going now is completely different. It's a whole new world that they're going to love and they're going to enjoy. I want those people living in the Scotland district to benefit as much as possible from having that large group of persons within their communities. Now, I've outlined mainly the harsh realities that characterize St. Andrew, but I just want to say that I use the term infrastructural revolution. This is but the beginning of what I think would trigger or spark a greater revolution, infrastructural revolution in that Scotland district. There are other things that are coming. Just a few weeks ago, I was privileged to give a speech at a groundbreaking ceremony for, I think it's like 500 kilowatt solar voltaic farm generation, power generation plant in St. Andrew. In St. Andrew. This is the direction that we're going to be a part of the green movement. We are a green parish, and we are going to be part of that green power generating movement. And in that, I would have heard discussion of even a greater expansion of that capacity, where even other areas are going to be used for dual purpose, of course, which will involve a bit of farming as well as a bit of solar power generated as well. So we're going to, we perhaps have the smallest draw on the grid, perhaps. In fact, we do have the smallest draw on the grid, but we will be contributing to the grid in short time. That's part of the revolution that's coming to St. Andrew, that greening and infrastructure revolution. If only we had the infrastructure in place that we can actually, send power straight to the grid, because I know it's not in place right now. But we can be part of that movement, and we are going to start. It's going to start soon, because I was part of the ceremony. And other players with deeper pockets have already indicated to me that yes, they are interested in bringing this kind of technology into St. Andrew. So St. Andrew, as my good friend in St. John would say, is on the rise. We are on the rise. Things are happening. And yes, we're going to need those roads. We're going to need proper roads that person can bring the equipment in and take the equipment out without having to worry about wear and tear. We're going to have the proper connectivity that persons will have to drive out 40 minutes in gas when they could do it in 10 minutes in gasoline. That infrastructure is going to complement what is in store for St. Andrew as we build out our community, as we build out our constituency, as we build out the Scotland district. Because it's not going to stop in St. Andrew alone. It's going to extend all into St. Joseph, and I suspect St. Thomas as well. But just give you a sense of some of the things that are coming to that part of Barbados. That part of Barbados is not static. You see the value, the Prime Minister, the government has seen the value in St. Andrew, and other people are seeing the value in St. Andrew. And the reality is that you're going to need a proper network to boost the economy. And not only just the economy of the northern parts of Barbados, but the economy of the country. And that is important. I'm going to wrap up now because I know that my time is drawing near. I just want to speak quickly to the...
Remember, so your Honourable Member said you are aware that your time was drawing near. You said that?
Yes.
In hindsight.
Let me just wrap up quickly.
In hindsight. I understand. No, your time, you should wind up. Your time has long expired.
I felt as though I was just talking about...
Yes. You ought not to have mentioned that, you see?
Switch into second gear. Okay.
Well, but no. It may be in your interest to turbocharge. Don't switch into second or third gear.
Let me just wrap up by saying that, as I said, I'm proud to be part of a government that have seen the value in St. Andrew, in the Scotland district, in improving the infrastructure, not only for the betterment of the entire country, but for the people, especially who live in these places, who work in these places, and who want to stay in the Scotland district. Because if you've been there long enough, as much as people are moving away, there are people who still will want to remain and those who would like to come back. But it's just that they need to have this kind of infrastructure in place. And that is coming. A change is coming. This is our time. This is our season. The Scotland district on the whole is on the rise. And I'm glad to be part and parcel of that wonderful change that's coming to the north of Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
I remember St. John.
Mr. Speaker, he is absolutely correct. St. John is rising, definitely rising. I rise this evening to support this resolution because I played a small part in the process when I was riding shotgun with the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central. Every week, Mr. Speaker, we used to meet on this to try to move the needle forward a little more every week. And it is pleasing now to date that we have finally reached that place where we can see that this project is about to start. In 2018, Mr. Speaker, when I won the seat in St. John, there was a monster with 4 heads: water, employment, housing, and roads. Today, Mr. Speaker, this government would have removed the head of one of those monsters, but also today, we still have this lingering issue with the water, and that is the monster that was taken care of with the vineyard augmentation project. Just now, I saw a couple of messages that the water in the constituency was off for the last 3 or so days, Mr. Speaker, and it is a concern, and I'm raising it here so that everyone will know that we are still having some issues with water. I'm sure in quick time that it will be resolved, but it is a problem. But Mr. Speaker, those three, there's a trinity now remaining, and I suspect that, like a lot of my colleagues, we still have that problem. Employment, housing, and roads. And it is impacting St. John in a significant way. But I am pleased to say that since 2018, the mantra that I am constantly referring to, St. John is rising, that the monsters are getting smaller and smaller within the constituency of St. John. I have seen where a number of houses are being repaired within the constituency. Houses prior to ELSA and subsequent to ELSA are being repaired within the constituency. I have seen where pit toilets are being removed within the constituency, and I'm pleased about that. The other monster of employment, it is impossible, Mr. Speaker, for this government to find employment for everyone, but we would have done some things in terms of the 360 program and other programs to ensure that employment was in place for a number of persons all across the country, including St. John. The road network in St. John, Mr. Speaker, was not touched for 60 years prior to 2018. I heard the Honourable Member for St. Andrew talking about 40 years. For 60 years, we had roads in St. John. Up to today, some of those roads are still in the same state that they were in 60 years ago. Yes, while I was at the ministry, we were able to touch almost, if not every single constituency with at least one road during the period that I was at the Ministry of MTW. But Mr. Speaker, in St. John, there's some roads that were fixed, and I give thanks, and the people of St. John give thanks for that, but we still have a number of roads that are in a state of disrepair. We have main roads that look like cart roads, and I'm not afraid to say that I still live in a cart road because I am still living in the constituency. And I get pressure, you know, you were at the ministry and you live in this road, but I thought there was a need for other roads to be fixed. So I identified other roads in the constituency that I believe were in a worse shape than the one that I drive my vehicle in. But we had roads like Sherburne that were fixed. We had roads like Cherry Grove and Henley that were fixed. We had roads like half of Pothouse that were fixed. But there's still problems with the road within the constituency. I still have, Mr. Speaker, some areas that are very, very, very dangerous in relation to traffic flow. I have Messiah Street Junction that is a real death trap. I have 4 roads that is also a death trap. So I'm hoping on an incremental basis, Mr. Speaker, that these issues within the constituency will be taken care of. I still have issues in Collie Savannah in terms of roads. I have Ashford that is a major problem. I have my friend Gozelle who's living in Small Hope who constantly asks about having her road fixed. There's Messiah Street, there's Lovers Road, there's Codrington Road. All of these, Mr. Speaker, are roads that are still outstanding within the constituency. 60 years, nothing was done prior to 2018. But this particular project, this particular compliant project will impact in a significant way some of the main thoroughfares within the constituency of St. John. And about a year ago, one of the players in the tourism sector would have placed something in the papers indicating that their vehicles will no longer traverse the roads of Newcastle and Foster Hall. And I, without really bragging about it, I would say that I have the closest thing to Coney Island in the island, because we have a road that is like a roller coaster, Mr. Speaker. And this is one of the roads that will be sorted under the Scotland district. This is the same Foster Hall and Andromed's Garden to Bath that is being taken care of in this particular project. And this will bring a certain level of relief to those persons within the area, because it is expected that Foster Hall, Glen Burnie, Martins Bay, Welch, Pothouse will also be taken care of in this Scotland district phase. And I have an eatery in St. John, Mr. Speaker, I believe somebody mentioned it earlier today at Martins Bay, that is being severely impacted because of the state of the road in that area. And I can't wait until we reach that particular stage. I'm told that it is possible that the Andromeda to Bath Hill road will be the second road or the second major road within the Complant project. I fully expect that if it is a case where Gabions will be prepared, constructed for this particular project, that employment too will come to some of those youngsters within the constituency of St. John that is not now working. So I see, Mr. Speaker, this project as a plus for the constituency. It will provide an opportunity, like I said, for more commerce to come to the constituency. There's a young lady who plies her trade on the same Foster Hall route, and I suspect that business is slow for the same reason that that particular tourism player would have indicated. Not a lot of travel on that particular road, so therefore business is slow. Mr. Speaker, this government would have done more for the road network in this country than I believe any other government post-independence. I sat in the ministry and I would have seen and I heard one of the technical officers indicating that never before he worked as hard as he worked since 2018 as it relates to the road works in this country. For 30 years, he said he never saw as much money being pumped into road works in this country. And I mean, it is amazing when you look at what is happening, when you look at the fact that several roads that people believe would never, ever be touched, never be touched. I spoke to the minister now who is in charge, and I used her constituency to get to work one morning, and I'm pleased because road work is happening in the area. The road is being patched. There's some roads that are being repaved. This was not the case 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So when you traverse this country, Mr. Speaker, you can see what this government is doing in relation to making the roads better. One of the members mentioned connectivity, which is a major, major plus in terms of having smooth roads. I recently had to change vehicles because of the issues that I was having in my constituency. And I was told by one of my constituents and my friend as well to just park every evening and hold up the bonnet and let people know that, you know, you're experiencing the problems too in St. John. I didn't have to do that, but government came in and we have some roads. Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to be much longer than that, just to say that I fully support this because I can see the benefits coming to the constituency of St. John, and hence the reason why I'm saying that St. John is rising, because I have seen all of those monsters being taken care of. I have a whole project that is coming at Poole that will see 174 houses being made available, not only to the constituents of St. John, but other persons as well who I believe will be interested in that. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise today again, thanking the people of St. John for the opportunity to serve and letting them know that everything cannot be done by government in one fell swoop. But we are doing what we're supposed to do on an incremental basis. There are 30 constituencies, and every single constituency is getting a piece of the pie. So the monsters will be removed over a period of time, but I'm just asking them to bear with government and understand that we're doing what we came to government to do. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member St. Lucie.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to make a contribution to this debate and to fully support this resolution. My support, Mr. Speaker, is based on three things. First of all, it is the most comprehensive and progressive roadworks project that has been seen in Barbados in recent history. Most progressive and comprehensive. Mr. Speaker, it touches a very critical area in Barbados, referred to as the Scotland District, 1/7 of Barbados. And anytime you have 1/7 of a country impacted by anything negative, Mr. Speaker, you need to pay some attention to it. You need to fix it, because this is part of the physical and economic development of Barbados. It adds to that, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, it addresses the need for proper road infrastructure of the people of the many communities in St. Joseph, St. Andrew, and St. John. And Mr. Speaker, this is important because these communities, and I will get to St. Lucie, I'm leaving St. Lucie to the last, have been long neglected, Mr. Speaker, have been long ignored. I want to remind Barbadians, I spend a lot of time and I listen to the calling program every day. And they have some apologists of the other side, the Democratic Labour Party, who want to are now crawling out the woodwork. Crawling out the woodwork and airing their mouths and questioning why government is spending and why government is borrowing and so on. Mr. Speaker, sir, this administration came to office with Barbados virtually on the verge of collapse in terms of its economy, in terms of its infrastructure, welfare in shambles, housing in shambles, agriculture in shambles, the environment, education, everything, Mr. Speaker, in a poor state. This government, and of course, the road infrastructure, because you would look at it, and I will mention this, I will get to this later down, but the road infrastructure in almost every single constituency, even though you had a minister, the former member for St. Philip North, who did almost everything in that constituency and still ain't doing that because they still got problems up there. So persons like yourself, Mr. Speaker, ain't getting none happen. In St. Lucie, we drive on what's left of the road and not the left side of the road. So the country, the state of the roads and the infrastructure, inclusive of the bridges, Mr. Speaker, was in a state of total disrepair and decline. The country was going down the drain, almost in a comatose state, Mr. Speaker. And we have to remind those persons in the Democratic Labour Party who now jump up and jump on for the calling programs every day to make people believe Barbados is worse off than it was when we took over in 2018. And the one thing that I want to say to this administration and my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to defend and we need to speak to the progress, we need to speak to the work of this Barbados Labour Party administration from 2018. From 2018 up to now, we've been working, we have hit the ground running, and in a case, Mr. Speaker, where you had an administration that couldn't get 1 cent from anybody, we were able to come and get $230 million for roads. You imagine that the IADB Global Roads, they went in and met with the IADB from 2015. And we still had to come and finish and get that project. And that project has started a few weeks ago with the 7 global roads that have to be done, Mr. Speaker. The CAF roads, $50 million US. That will see roads being done in communities like the ones in your area, Mr. Speaker. Communities like Well Road and Higginson and St. Lucie and Josie Hill and First State, Mr. Speaker. We've been able to unlock funds. That is why persons are saying that this has been the most progressive work. The most work being done on the road infrastructure, reconstruction, and rehabilitation ever, Mr. Speaker. And we have to understand and we have to learn to appreciate. You see, the thing is that Barbadians have come to expect action from the Barbados Labour Party. The truth is that they have marked the Barbados Labour Party harder than they mark the other party at any point in time because they realize that we don't put something in a manifesto, Mr. Speaker, and then tell them that a manifesto is there is no social contract. They recognize that when we put something in a manifesto, Mr. Speaker, when we come back to them and we ask them to give us the vote again, we produce a document, Mr. Speaker, which tells them exactly what we have done. So we look at our manifesto every day. I was in the cabinet, Mr. Speaker, and I heard the Honourable Prime Minister said on more than once to ministers, you see that manifesto? That is your guide. That is the document by which you operate. And sometimes you have to make a little shift and a little change, Mr. Speaker, along the way. But by and large, it is the document by which you have to operate, the document by which this government operates, because it is a social contract with the people. But, sir, it would not only be the roads in the Scotland district. I'm sure and I'm confident that the government will also be undertaking a residential road program in the communities across Barbados, in Husbands, in Mile and a Quarter, up Lonesome Hill, where the Honourable Member for St. Peter and I drove when we went into that, when I was in the ministry and saw the degradation of the roads. And one thing that we must always remember, now I am one who does not believe in safe seats, because we have some seats, Mr. Speaker, that the people have been faithful to us. In the seat where I am, Mr. Speaker, that I now occupy and intend to occupy for a long time, Mr. Speaker, you know, it was thought to be a safe seat. St. John was thought to be a safe seat, but the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest, I'm a worker, and you know that. You know that, yes, sir. But these were seats that were thought to be safe. And I understand, therefore, the Honourable Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, who's responsible for road infrastructure at this present time, that the pie has to be shared now between 30, all 30, not peace, and some, all 30, because the Barbadians were so confident. Barbados were they believed that the Barbados Labour Party could deliver, and they said, look, we will give you all that it takes to deliver and do what you have to do. So we have to touch every single constituency, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to know that in looking at the program, so you don't just go into the Scotland district, that is long overdue. Those people have suffered for a while. There was a time, Mr. Speaker, when I was not in Parliament and I had a lot of time on my hands. And on Sunday evenings, sometimes you would rent a car and you would just drive along the Scotland. That's how I learned those roads, you know. And I wondered how people maneuvered in St. Joseph and St. John, because I would drive from St. Lucie right up on the coast, come through Boscobel, go through St. Andrew, down Morgan Lewis Hill, up the East Coast, and make my way till I come out by Three Houses in St. Philip, Mr. Speaker, and come down the airport road, and then come down on the Bay Street side and down the West Coast. That's how I learned Barbados. Huh? And I wondered, Mr. Speaker, how could persons be asked to be driving on such roads? I didn't know that time would come, Mr. Speaker, when I would be proud, and I'm proud to be part of an administration that is going to bring relief to these people. We are about delivering, Mr. Speaker. We are about delivering. And we will go into communities, because it's not only in the South. The South has had some roads done recently. We come into the East, in the North and the East. St. Michael has had its share, Mr. Speaker. And I expect soon, Mr. Speaker, in short order, that they will start with the top of the country, the only female parish, Mr. Speaker, the one that I'm proud and happy to represent, St. Lucie. I got areas like Maycox Road, Fosdick Road, which is due for reconstruction, Mr. Speaker. Higginson Road, which is falling apart. From Crab Hill Police Station to Archers Bay. In serious state of disrepair. Grenadiers to St. Swithins. Josie Hill right down to Rock Hall, right down to Jimmers, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I got the bridge at Pike Corner. The day when we had the floods, you heard the Honourable Minister said, member for St. Michael Southeast, spoke about that tragic day in November 2019, Mr. Speaker, when we lost a dear and precious youngster to the flood, the ravages of climate change, Mr. Speaker. And that bridge, I said it in the election campaign, and I'm going to repeat it again. I've already spoken to the Honourable Minister in this regard, because I want that bridge completed, that it will be named after in this youngster who was at that time the outgoing parish ambassador for St. Lucie. A decent young man, Mr. Speaker, but lost his life in an unfortunate incident. No fault of anybody's, but that is just as fate would have it. And I want to be in a position, Mr. Speaker, before this term is finished, and definitely before I leave public life, to be able, Mr. Speaker, to unveil this and name this bridge in honor of this youngster, Mr. Speaker. So the government is working. But in doing so, I want to say to the Honourable Minister and my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, now we are embarking on a serious road repair, reconstruction program. But we have to work hard, Mr. Speaker. We have to make sure that having done this, we follow it up with a maintenance program, because that is the problem, you know. We cannot come back now a few years or ask another administration to come a few years from now and fix more roads as such, because we have to realize that you don't get funds when the world is changing. So one of the things that is important, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, is that we put a road maintenance program in place. We do the various checks and so on. Because when you build a road, a road should at least last you for about 20 years. That is my view. I am not technical, so I don't know. But we have to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we have a road maintenance program in place. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be associated. I am proud to be part of an administration which just does not talk the talk, but we walk the walk, Mr. Speaker. And Barbados has so entrusted us at this particular time for the second time in the history of this country. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, the second time in the history of this country with all 30 seats. This tells me, Mr. Speaker, that they expect good work from us that they got in the first term, and they allow us to be able to continue. We shall not disappoint you, Barbados. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was just reminded whenever I canvass in Alexandria, that part of Alexandria that is in my constituency. Alexandria is in the parish of St. Lucie, but there is a small part of it in the parish, in the constituency of St. Peter. And whenever I go there, Mr. Speaker, and I speak to a certain gentleman, he reminds me that he goes to church with the Honourable Member for St. Lucie. And he always tells me what a powerful preacher the Honourable Member for St. Lucie is. I was reminded of those conversations just now, Mr. Speaker, when I heard the Honourable Member, my neighbour, that powerful preacher from St. Lucie. And it always brings me pleasure, Mr. Speaker. I have a lot of connections to St. Lucie, besides being neighbor, maternal grandmother, wife, in-laws, all kinds of relatives from St. Lucie. And I'm so happy that St. Lucie finally has a representative, somebody who can properly represent them in this honorable chamber. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this resolution before this honorable chamber. And my support for anything is always critical support. Let me just put on the table up front and early. My support is always critical support, and that's because the people of St. Peter figured that they voted for somebody who thinks. They've always done that, actually. I see this compliant program, this program to address roads in the Scotland district, as a very important infrastructural development in this country. Infrastructure and the development of infrastructure is critical if any country is going to develop. You can't develop, even if we had lots of natural resources, Mr. Speaker, we would not be able to develop those resources unless we had the infrastructure to support the development. In a country where our people are our single most important resource, and we have people living in that 14% of this country, and in a country where most of our foreign exchange and lots of our GDP is based on tourism, either directly or indirectly, developing the road network in that area of the country where there's the greatest scenery of this country is important. Now, I come from an industry, I spent most of my life in an industry, in that same industry, the tourism industry. And those of us who are familiar with the evolution of the industry in Barbados will say to you that after the tourism accommodation facilities in Bridgetown, the next stage of development was on the East Coast in the Scotland district. And the Scotland district, for those who have done the research, the newspapers of the time, people came to this country to recuperate. There are quotations in the newspapers of the time, Mr. Speaker, in the 1800s, particularly early 1900s, where people referred to the environment as ozonated air. They spoke to the quality of the environment and the fact that it was so positive, so healing, so recuperative, that people would travel to this country to get to that part of the island. These are not small matters. Tourism is going in the direction of health, wellness, heritage, and this area is important. But I mentioned even before I spoke to the tourism component, to the fact that there are people living in this area, human beings like you and I, who deserve proper infrastructure, who deserve good infrastructure in spite of the fact that they live in an area where good road infrastructure is difficult. This Barbados Labour Party recognizes that creating good road infrastructure in that part of our country is difficult. But we believe that we have a duty and a responsibility to our people. And so even though it is difficult, even though, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch West indicated, it is often expensive, we are not putting prices on people. We are not saying, well, because it is expensive, you can go and do without. And where it is cheaper to do, you will get. This Barbados Labour Party does not operate in that way. We believe that the country, all of us, as taxpayers, have a right to some of the infrastructural development in this country. And so my support for this compliant resolution is full because I see in it a recognition that everybody in this country matters. Now, I also speak against the backdrop of something that I had cause to refer to in January of this year. And I called it, and I think we heard it from the honourable members from St. Lucie and St. Thomas and St. Andrew so far today in this debate. I refer to it as the Great Northern Neglect. A Democratic Labour Party and the issue of beaten up or not beaten up, or being political or not being political, those kind of considerations don't really come into my mind. I prefer to base my interventions only on speaking truth. So however that truth falls is how it falls. The Democratic Labour Party seemed to have an ideology of systematic neglect for the northern parishes and the northern constituencies of this country. And so the northern constituencies suffered. No attention paid whatsoever to the infrastructural development of this part of the country, and therefore no care demonstrated for the people who live in that part of the country. That, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, is untenable. People who operate like that must be considered vagabonds, wicked. I don't use language that is much stronger than that, but if anybody has any other stronger language, feel free to use it. Don't curse, but feel free to use stronger language. But it was a wicked approach, an approach that said some people were better than others, maybe because of their voting patterns. Some people say that. If that is the case, it is even more wicked than I initially said. But this Barbados Labour Party has been doing work all over the country. And I think the party, as a matter of fact, that is the reason why I joined the party. I try not to associate with wickedness. I'm not perfect, but to walk about and look for the worst people to associate with would not be my style. So I became a member of the Barbados Labour Party. A party that recognizes that all of us are in this together. A lady in Spikestown this morning told me that some Dems houses getting fixed. Well, I fixed her. And I indicated to her that we don't go down that road. She is thinking about the years between 2008 and 2018, where everything seemed partisan. We don't go down that road. And sometimes we get licks from our own supporters for it. But we are a principled group of people in this honorable chamber. And we believe that all persons in this country are entitled to the benefits. And in this case, the benefits that come from the development of the infrastructure in this country. Now, I want to say that there are very few countries in the world, just like there are very few businesses that are able to operate, that are able to make quantum leaps in their development without going into debt. I do not know how the children and grandchildren of persons who took material, clothes baskets, clothes pegs from East Indian itinerant vendors, how the children and grandchildren of people who were able to get a fridge or a stove only because they were able to go to courts or standards to take it on hire purchase. I do not understand how the children and grandchildren of those who now live in houses that are owned by the commercial banks in Bridgetown believe that a country can build out its infrastructure without incurring debt. Now, I know that the standing orders really require that we don't tread the ground that others have trod. And it's already been said in this debate that the last Democratic Labour Party government incurred a lot of debt, but you can't see, up to now, you can't see where the money has gone. Well, the Attorney General says that he has seen a lot of big legal bills. I don't know if that was some of the debt money. I'm not an investigator, I'm not a police officer. But the infrastructure of this country does not say to any of us that the money that was borrowed was well spent. This Barbados Labour Party government, whenever it incurs debt for development. Debt for development. And that is the reason why countries incur debt. It is the reason why businesses incur debt. You incur debt so that you can position your organization or your country for future growth. Because it's that growth, Mr. Speaker, it is that growth that will not just repay the debt, but that will ensure that the people of the country and succeeding generations are able to enjoy improved standards of living. The principle for households, the principle for businesses, exactly the same as the principle for countries. And so I want the people of the country to recognize my fellow Barbadians, to recognize that they should not pay a whole lot of attention to groups of people who have squandered their money in the past, who have borrowed and not demonstrated properly what they have done with the borrowed money. They should not listen to those groups of people now pontificating as though they are experts on managing debt. They are not. They are, well, some people refer to them as criminals. I don't think I should go that route. There are people who make a profession out of mishandling the funds of a country. They have reduced it to a fine art and now propose to speak to the country and to speak to Barbadians about how debt should be managed. Barbadians ought to see that for the politicking that it is. My children tell me that we've gone past that foolish politics. They want intelligent stuff. And so I ask Barbadians to tell those who are walking around now resurrecting lectures at George Street and spouting stuff. Tell them to really get something in their head first about how debt is managed and then come back and talk. We're willing to engage. We are more than willing to engage. We don't run from debate. We will engage. Now, the other thing about debt is that debt must be manageable. The term sheet in this resolution, Mr. Speaker, speaks to 20 years as the term. It speaks to 48 months, 4 years for disbursement. It speaks to a 5-year, it doesn't use the word moratorium, but lay people like me refer to it as a moratorium. Economists at the Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central, use different terms. But a 5-year moratorium. In other words, a period of time after having engaged in the construction where you can, as we would say, catch your hand before the repayments begin. I consider, Mr. Speaker, for infrastructural development, those terms to be excellent terms. 20 years, 4 years to get the work done, 5-year moratorium. So 1 year after disbursement finishes, that year you're still not repaying at the time. But what I find to be even better, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central spoke to this, 2% interest. 2% interest in June 2022 is an excellent interest rate. An excellent interest rate. 2%. And I think that this loan from Compliant is a loan that is obviously one where the government of this country has determined that it wanted nothing but the best, nothing but the most favorable for this country. Generations to come, because 20 years from now, when the last payment is made, most of us will not be here. But generations from now will look back to this resolution and to this loan and will say to their peers that we did not leave a noose around their neck. We negotiated the best terms possible in June 2022. In Europe, interest rates are going up. The Federal Reserve just, even though everybody expected the interest rate rise, just jumped the entire system in the United States and jumped a lot of the rest of the world as well by the 75 basis points increase. Because there is a recognition that something has to be done. Interest rates are the policy option for those involved in managing the monetary system. That is their option. That is their tool of trade. Interest rates are going up. Europe followed, the UK followed. Interest rates are going up, locking in 2% at this point, Mr. Speaker, and to the country through you, is an excellent interest rate for this kind of development in this country. Roads are something that the people of St. Peter always talk about. And they always talk about it because I know, and they repeat, and I repeat, that almost every road leading to an area where my people live is a very similar to a Carrot Road. The Honourable Member for St. Lucie referred to a tour that he and I did some years ago, and he did not realize that there were such bad roads in St. Peter. I also went with the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central through some parts of the constituency. I also went with the Prime Minister through some areas in the constituency. The road to Black Bess is now of a condition that could be referred to as legendary, but not legendary for any good reason. The road through Farm Road, terrible. The road leading to Fort Hill, terrible. The road through Roebuck and Indian Ground, terrible. The road in Boscobel, particularly in the alley, terrible. So bad, Mr. Speaker, that when the Prime Minister went to Boscobel and stopped to speak to some residents and expected to hear of what we refer to as water woes, the residents of all of the houses that she interacted with spoke about roads and the road that they have to travel every day. I did not even mention Mount Breverton, one of the worst as well in the constituency. So we have our challenges. We have significant challenges. There are people in Fort Hill whose friends, and Mount Breverton, whose friends have told them, we can no longer visit you. It is just too painful to us and to our vehicles. They refuse to come to these districts. And I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that we in St. Peter expect attention to be placed. I am not going on the road of the Honourable Member for St. Thomas to say that I am not grudging anybody. I'm not using that word at all. I'm saying straight up, the people of St. Peter want roads fixed. I will say that they recognize, because St. Peter people are some of the nicest in this whole country, they recognize the challenges facing this government. They recognize that government has been working hard to try to address the issues. They also recognize that they've been seeing roadworks in different places. And they have asked me to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that they expect to see a start somewhere in the constituency. Now, we are having a bridge, and I think this is probably because the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast spoke to not recognize how many bridges there are, but I got a lot of them because St. Peter is full of gullies. So to get across gullies, you got to go over bridges. We are having some work done on the Thomas Bridge. This is a bridge in Tree Hill, going down to where the bus turns around. And work is going reasonably well on that bridge. That was crucial because a bus almost ran off the road and turned over down the side some months ago. We would want that the gas be pressed on the repair of that bridge because obviously the road is not passable. But this government of which I'm a part, must not be in the future seen as party to the same great northern neglect of the last Democratic Labour Party government. I should point out, Mr. Speaker, that the Scotland District, according to the first schedule of the 1972 Town and Country Planning Order, Town and Country Planning Development Order, that order at page 11, on the second page of the first schedule, identifies what I consider to be the boundary of the Scotland District. And I just want to inform this Honourable Chamber that some of Fort Hill is included in that definition. Some of Indian Ground and Prospect is included in that definition. Cherry Tree Hill, as mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and Boscobel, both Boscobel in St. Andrew and Boscobel St. Peter, are all included in the definition for the Scotland District found in that schedule. Allow me to add to that what is considered, and I invite us to do the research, what is considered to be the greatest, the largest landslide in Barbados, the largest landslide in Barbados took place in the year 1901. The largest landslip in this country, 1901, and it took place in Boscobel. Boscobel's geology, or as I heard some people, well, let me stick to geology because I may call a bigger word that may not be the right word. The geology of Boscobel is the geology of the Scotland District, and that is the reason why Boscobel is in the Scotland District. And I expect, Mr. Speaker, that the infrastructure of Boscobel will be part of the road rehabilitation as it is rolled out across the Scotland District. At some point, I expect that the alley in Boscobel will be addressed as well. There's a lot of potential in the Scotland District for economic activity. Economic activity, not just on the macro level for the country, but economic activity for the people who live in the Scotland District. We do not want, and the country cannot afford, a situation where we walk about talking about refugees, but we essentially have internally displaced people. When a person leaves the Scotland District because they don't have road or because they don't have water, that is creating a situation where you have people who are internally displaced. They may be going to a house, a decent house, but they are forced to move. Not an innate desire to move, but a forcing to move. Our people deserve better. This government will do better by the people. This compliant program is the first step, or one of the first steps, in doing better by the people. The people have to be able to stay and enjoy good infrastructure, but they also have to be able to stay and enjoy some economic benefit from this area of our country that is so ripe for economic development. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have in Boscobel, as an example, right at the border of the risk, an area of land that was gifted to the people of this country. And the discussions we've had indicate that it should be made into a park for the enjoyment of the people and also for the enjoyment of those who will come to visit us. It is a place called Monkey Jump. It is right between Pico Tenerife and Cove Bay. A fantastic view of the East Coast. And if that is to become a place that people want to visit and can visit, then they must be able, because we do not have any helipads there and we don't have an airport there, they must be able to drive. And so it is important, again, for the infrastructure to be such that the economic activity can be exploited for the benefit of the surrounding communities. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to go any further. I think it is very, very clear that the development that we've been debating in this House today is absolutely essential for this country. We've been talking ever since March, April, May, June of 2020 about building back better or building for a better future. We've been talking about what we want Barbados to look like coming out of a pandemic period, a pandemic that has been crippling both from a health perspective, but also from an economic perspective. We've been talking about building better, dealing with the road infrastructure in the Scotland district is part of this government's perspective on what it means to build better, to come out of a debilitating pandemic in a position to be able to take advantage of opportunities, opportunities for the people and opportunities for the country. I commend this resolution. I commend the debt that will be incurred. I commend the development that will come out of the incurring of this debt. I commend all of these to the people of this country and ask them to recognize that this is what a responsible government does for the development of all its people. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I not to be very long this afternoon, but I did feel that it was important that I share a few words on what I think is a very important conversation that we're having. And as I listened to the various speakers, from the Honourable Member, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, to the last person who spoke, I felt so proud, really, to be a member of this team. Because I had, as a lecturer, I always made the point that you really cannot separate economic growth from social development. That you cannot separate the things that you do as part of what you may consider even to be infrastructural development from social development. And speaker after speaker, sir, made the case to prove that we cannot make that separation. And the fundamental difference between this Labour Party and the other governments, or the former government, the Democratic Labour Party government, is that we recognize that there is that relationship between social development and economic growth. And that the things that we seek to do, we do, sir, fundamentally for the development of people in this country. And if COVID has shown us anything, and I believe that it has shown us a lot, it is that unless we prioritize human beings and their welfare, that anything else that we do is meaningless. That if we try to build a society, sir, where only some prosper and the vast majority do not prosper, that we are creating what is called distorted development, and at the end of the day, any country that practices distorted development, whether they do it on the south, the east, the west, or the north, it will disrupt the entire country. Barbados cannot speak of itself becoming a developed nation or any kind of development, sir, if that development does not include everyone, including the persons, sir, in the Scotland district. And for too long, many people believed that the Scotland district was left out of this development. The north was left out, the east was left out. St. John was left out, ironically, having had 2 prime ministers. But there is a view, sir, that development cannot leave out the people who need the development the most. And, sir, I begin this conversation because it is clear to me, sir, that when we talk about loans and debt, people have to understand that this is about bread and butter issues. This is about being able to feed our children at the end of the day, sir. I did the call-in program just last week, I think, last Friday. And persons called in asking about debt, and Barbados is going into so much debt, and we're leaving this much debt for our families. And it was clear to me that we need to give an education in understanding debt and to managing debt. And so that what we incur on our side is nothing compared to what the other side had incurred or how they went about doing it, sir. And the idea is that debt in itself, sir, is not bad. Debt in itself is not a bad thing, sir. I said that there are 4 things that you must consider. 1, can you pay it back? Can you pay it back? And if you are in a position, sir, where you build a country, sir, that is in a position to pay back your debt, even at your household level, if you take out a loan, are you in a position to pay it back? And we believe very strongly, sir, that we are in a position to pay back the debt that we are now incurring. Having come into office and deal with the bad debt, the nature of that debt, we dealt with that, sir, and to find ourselves in a position, sir, where we now can pay it back. The second thing that I think is important, sir, is it going to improve our productive capacity? Are you borrowing in a way that allows the country to be able to be better for it? It's like borrowing to go fetting on the one hand, like the other side did. Or is it borrowing, sir, to build back your house, fix your kitchen, do the things, sir, that will give value to your own house? Debt, all debt is not the same. If you are borrowing, sir, for wastage, if you cannot see what you did with it, it's wasted debt, sir. And the people of Barbados for a long time have been struggling with the debt that the Democratic Labour Party left this government and left the people of this country, sir. The third thing that I think is important, sir, are the terms favorable. And you can only negotiate favorable terms if you go in on a strong foot. But when you are so bad off, when you become the 3rd most indebted country in the world, behind Japan and Greece, what negotiation you could do? You have to take terms where you're paying 13% interest, all kinds of things. When you have to pay back now, nobody ain't giving you no grace period. We have moved from there, sir, when I sat as Blue Economy Minister and I tried to do the debt swap. And the premise of a debt swap is that you are so badly off that people would come and buy you out, buy your debt for cheap. So that Barbados was supposed to be so badly off that instead of people paying the dollar for the dollar that we owe, a man will come like they did in Belize and pay 55 cents to the dollar. And Barbados' debt was trading at par. And that the Prime Minister and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance and the economic team did such a good job that at one point Barbados' debt was trading above par. So we have to understand this. We have to understand it because it meant that the people had so much faith in the management of the economic affairs of this country, having been the 3rd most indebted country in the world, to a point where you were trading, your debt was trading above par. And even now, post-COVID, still trading extremely high. When people have no faith in you, your debt start trading for nothing. Your debt start trading for almost nothing. So does the questions that we had to ask ourselves. And in terms of this loan, these terms are so favorable. At 2%, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter just said, 60 months, a moratorium, or grace period. These terms are so favorable, and why is that important? Because it gives you time to let the loan work. If you borrow now, and you have to pay back now, you do not have time to see the benefit of the loan. So that when you have some time given to repay, one would assume that in the 5 years, You have done enough to bring investment back to the country. The country is in a better position to be able to pay its debt, sir. Even on that call-in program, you know, people called in and they were talking about the extra $46 million that we just borrowed. And it had to be explained that we did not borrow an additional $46 million, that those were the terms of the original loan, and that because the loan had come to an end, it was almost the final disbursement. But it was not an additional $46 million. But even if it is a debt that we incur, is it a manageable debt? Is it responsible borrowing? I listened, sir, permit me to call it, sir, because it was national, on the call-in program. Yesterday, Professor Justin Robinson also made the point yesterday that it is about whether you borrow responsibly or not. I remember Prime Minister Arthur, before he passed, obviously. I don't communicate with persons on the great beyond, no matter how great they are. I wish. But I remember him saying that we should have gone to the IMF earlier. Justin Robinson and Kevin, Dr. Greenwich said the same thing yesterday. Because what you do is that you have to do austerity measures regardless when you're in that kind of position. But we had the benefit of having finance, sir, at a good rate and allowed us to do the things that we did. But it was not just the debt that we took on. Do you all not remember the Prime Minister standing over there and saying, before she sends Barbados on a march, that she got to make sure Bajans get breakfast? Was it not the same Prime Minister who made sure that people in the public sector got a raise, pensioners got a raise? Well, have we forgotten? And that we went to the IMF and we did things that no other country in the history of an IMF deal was able to do? Has it been that long? So have we not been a very responsible government? And have we not prioritized the interests of the poor? So what would change? Why would people believe that all of a sudden we have become a reckless people? That these things would change, sir? Nothing is about to change. The management of this country remains in very, very good hands, sir. And I can say so because the evidence is clear. The facts speak for themselves, as the lawyers would say. The evidence is clear.
Rise ipsa
Look at her. Yes, sir. The facts speak for themselves. And any economist worth its salt, any economist would tell you, sir, that what we are doing to finance the roads and so on is not new. People do these things, sir. And are we doing it in a responsible way? I was in Jamaica not too long ago. There are places now where you have to pay. In America, you pay to use the road. You want to drive on that road, you got to pay to use the road. We haven't done that yet in Barbados. But roads have to be financed. These things have to be financed somehow. We've done it, sir, very responsibly. And the idea is, sir, at some point in time, there are taxes. You cannot live and not expect to pay taxes. Want health care, want education, want to be the beneficiary of all the good things that Barbados has to offer. We have to pay. And what is emerging, sir, is this concept now that I see people are saying they don't want to pay anything to do with the sewage tax, the sewage levy, because they're not connected to the sewage, or that they were not living on the South Coast, so they shouldn't have to pay that. Some people are saying that they don't live in the Scotland district, they don't want to have to be responsible for anything over there. Some saying they don't live in the Bell, they shouldn't have to be financing what's happening in the Bell. They don't live by QEH, so they don't think that we should finance what is happening at the QEH. And that is not the nature of who Barbadians are, and that it is a few people who are emerging now attempting to dominate the conversation. That Barbadians should not pay to help other Barbadians. That is not who we are.
No, it's not.
And we have been doing it for years, sir. So why should I not feel that it is my responsibility to help fix the Scotland district? And the economics of it make a lot of sense, but beyond the economics, it is the moral thing to do, to be able to look out for each other, sir. I am hopeful to be part of the solution, and not part of the people who have a problem for every solution. And that this government, sir, has been extremely responsible, but why do we have to fix that road? Imagine that you have a business at the end of the road. Well, no business is coming to you. When I was minister responsible for the port, I remember meeting with the persons who control the tour buses. Many of them stopped going because going down the road was damaging the buses. And when I met with them, I said, well, this can't be. Not that I was concerning myself overly with the persons who control the tour buses. I was. But my main concern was the people who were selling at the end of the day. Every tourist ain't going, well, how the man that's selling the chains and things can make $1. Every tourist not going, how it is that the people who selling food to the same tourists can make $1. Or the man who sell the conch shells, how them people can eat, sir? So if we don't finance these roads, how ordinary people can live in this country? And if the tourists stop coming, how the ordinary people can live? When you drive on them yourself, you gotta, I mean, if you know the country, you gotta take some little roads. You gotta use ways to avoid the roads that you know. That is not what Barbados is. It is not who we are. It should not be what we become, sir. And it is about real people. That is what I intend to communicate. This is about doing something, sir, for ordinary people, for real people. There is this bad word about debt. You go into debt, it is a bad word. If you go and borrow something, it is a bad word. We don't complain when people borrow to build a house. We don't. My mother made a complaint when they borrowed to buy a car. She thought they should buy land. Because people who are wiser know how to invest. Poor people have known for years how to invest. Just didn't have a lot of resources to invest. Our government, sir, is making a wise investment. And here is why. In the Ministry of People Empowerment, I keep saying social transformation. I am stuck with you, the Honourable Member for St. Michael East. He used to be my former minister, sir. He was my boss. And he definitely was a mentor. But I remember, sir, in the ministry that I now lead, we have 340-something people still housed because of Hurricane Elsa. There are still people who are housed because of Hurricane Elsa in government temporary housing or government temporarily paid accommodation. Still housed. In the event of a disaster, if you cannot access a road to get to the people who need help the most, what do you think is going to happen to those people? If we leave that road as it is, what happens to the people who live out there? How can we be predicting, unless we are heartless, that Barbados, because of the climatic changes, now finds itself more vulnerable, and that the people therefore consequently find themselves more vulnerable? How can we argue that they are more vulnerable but do nothing to improve their conditions? It is heartless. And so it is definitely incumbent on this government, sir, to be able to do something about that. We are mapping now, sir, in the ministry, the poorest of the poor. We want to know where they live. We want to know how close is that person to a hurricane shelter. And one of the questions that we're asking when we're doing the map is there a road? Is there a road that would allow the emergency services to get to the person, sir? So this is about development in its truest sense, allowing people to be able to live. The other thing, sir, that I think is funny, I heard somebody speaking, I can't remember which one of my colleagues, speaking of people migrating from, I think it was the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, people migrating from up that side, or was it the Honourable Member for St. Peter? I can't remember. But people moving from one part of Barbados to go to the other part to avoid the roads and so on. Barbados is too small. We are too small. I get home when I go in the country, you know how I get home? Bus to city stop. And you follow the bus to city stop saying, you gotta get back to town. It is too small. The idea that we can migrate from St. Lucie to Christchurch to avoid a bad road is not who we are. This government is asking people not to migrate and go anywhere. We are saying to the people, we will fix the road. And that is what we are doing, sir. And all the roads up that side, sir, that need the attention, sir. But I do know, sir, it's not only me, I see my colleagues laughing, but I know many people in here use the bus to city stop.
That's correct.
As a guiding light.
They lost as we do.
Many people. So this really, sir, is about people for people. You know, sir, the other thing is this. You know, when people hear of a loan to China, they start to panic from China. They start to imagine that you've sold out the family's silver. And that for 30 pieces of silver, We betrayed all that we are. But at the Prime Minister that I know that leads this country, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Transport that I know that help lead the country, the cabinet that I serve in and the members of parliaments that I serve with, sir, would never sell out the country's pieces of silver. The country's wares for pieces of silver. Never. So in this deal, sir, we're not tying our port as other countries did when they dealt with China. We are not tying our airport as other countries did when they dealt with China. We are not tying our hospital in this deal as other countries did. We are protecting the assets of this country, sir. It was a negotiation. And that we did not compromise our values nor our assets in the process of the negotiation, sir. And that Barbadians are getting a good deal in this deal, sir. 2% is a good deal. And that for years to come, I remember as a little boy, people were talking about the ABC Highway when it was to be built. And it was the worst idea ever. And that it should never have done it. And when our former leader, sir, was talking about building more lanes, people couldn't even see the purpose of having one lane. And that years later, because visionaries are sometimes so far ahead of the rest of us, years later now they understand where he was going with that, this government, sir. Years later, the people will come to understand what it is that we are saying. The real tourist value, the real agricultural value, the real development, the cultural, artistic value, sir, a lot of it will happen in that very same Scotland district. And that we will reap the benefits of that, sir, in a few years from now. I have absolutely no doubt. And sir, I am convinced, sir, that this is about people. I remember I took what do you call those off-road tours? A safari. A few of them. And the young man who was driving the safari tour was a historian. The man told me about things rising out the sea and the nature of the ordinary people, you know. The nature of the rock and how it was formed and what year. These different things that were merging to form it. I did the tour at Harson's Cave. Same kind of young, regular fella telling me about Barbados and where Barbados came from. The St. Nicholas Abbey tour, another youngster, ordinary looking, historian, dates and all kinds of things. We don't teach these things in school. And I feel that if we taught some of these things in school, we wouldn't have to convince people that it's necessary to fix the Scotland district because they would know its value. We have to teach the things that are of value in our school. So that when we say we're spending $256 million, we know that we're spending $256 million on something that is priceless. And people wouldn't be complaining, sir, because we have to do it. We have to put ourselves in that position, sir. So in my opinion, sir, this is about people. This is about putting people first. This is about making sure that when we talk about development, it is not distorted development where some get and some do not get. But so I couldn't sit without talking about St. Michael South, sir. I have a road. I have a road. As a matter of fact, when the Prime Minister saw my road, she said it was a road almost like the roads up in the Scotland district because I was slipping. I want to take this opportunity, sir. I want to take this. I don't need it on the complaint, sir, because the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, he's got me covered a long time. I want to just tell the residents there, because I pass there, sometimes they ask me about the road. And if they hear about this road, they're going to ask me. But in that budget, sir, we have $400 and something thousand to fix the road. The member for St. Michael East, the Deputy Prime Minister, has already given the assurance that the work has started. I know they started doing the drill holes, sir. I just want to give them the assurance that the work has started. This is a bad road. The Prime Minister deemed it the worst road she has seen in St. Michael. That's a fact. When she saw it, she said it is the worst road she has seen in St. Michael. That road in Riesland that is slipping. Houses over there are cracking up because of the road, sir. I just want to give them the assurance, sir, that the work is about to start. So, sir, as I close, I want to commend the Honourable, all the ministers, all the MPs involved in this work. I want to thank the people in that area, all the people in the north. So I've now recently moved to the north, so myself too, maybe. But I want to commend them, sir, and thank them for their patience. Because it's been generations after generations of promises made and promises not delivered. But this government, sir, is known for promises being made and promises being kept. And it is in that regard, sir, that I throw my fullest support behind the resolution, sir. I am grateful to the members of this cabinet, as I said, for recognizing that all of this, at the end of the day, is about people, sir. And I know, sir, if you were speaking freely as a man dedicated to the people, you would say the same thing. That at the end of the day, it is about people. And if anybody could come and tell me that they have a better deal than this, or that they could fix the Scotland district with a better deal than this, well, then I'll be willing to talk to them. But if you really ain't got nothing good to say, my mother used to say, if you ain't got nothing good to say, don't say nothing. Really? This, sir, is about development. It is about people, sir. I throw my fullest support behind it, sir. I'm making sure the most vulnerable people in that area, sir, are taken care of. With those few words, sir, I wish to thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to ditto every single thing that the last speaker said, and to say that I would not belabor the House today, but I could not sit in this chamber unless I'm able to extend my vocal ability as a unrepentant and still committed Josephine, a man of the soil of none other than the beautiful rustic parish of St. Joseph, born, raised, and never stream, buried in the fruitful hill of St. Joseph. But I want to say that I grew up, I must tell you, Mr. Speaker, sir, as an impressionable young man in St. Joseph, with the impression that St. Joseph and the people of St. Joseph and the people of rural Barbados were neglected. I grew up with the impression, Mr. Speaker, as a young man, young impressionable man in St. Joseph, and I am sure a lot of persons in the area believe that we were behind God's back. It became part of the folklore and the way how we were treated. And so it was the impression that water and the delivery of water to me, my family and to me as a young man in St. Joseph was just a dream. The delivery of social services, health services to the people in rural Barbados, a fantasy. The delivery of a proper transport system to the people of rural Barbados, again, another dream. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that since 2018, the dreams of the, I heard a member of parliament say, the member for the Bridgetown said, country boy, the dream of country people start to become a reality under this Barbados Labour Party. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to thank the Prime Minister, of course, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Member of Parliament for St. Michael South East, for ensuring that this dream, the Barbadian dream, the country boy dream, as the member for St. Michael in the city just alluded to, that dream could become a reality. But there are certain anomalies that the Scotland district is faced with. Unfortunately, I heard the member for St. Peter said it may be geological. I may call it geospatial when I am in certain spirits. But the reality of is that the complexion of the soil, the landscape design of the soil, the erodibility of the soil, and the formation makes the Scotland district an area vulnerable for slippage. And if you are going to construct a road network that is going to stand the test of time, Mr. Speaker, sir, then we have to not only look at putting down roads, but we have to look at interfusing that construction with proper soil networks and geological infrastructure to ensure that the road that you put down does not slip and move away from the area that it was placed. And that is the problem and the concern that I have. And as Minister of Environment, I want to say that I already spoke to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael's Southeast, the Deputy Prime Minister, to give her the rested assurance that my ministry will work with her. Because in the same way you're talking about putting down new roads, there must be adequate drainage and there must be adequate soil infrastructure. And you're only talking about the Gabions. I am talking now about proper hedgerow and the development of a hedgerow project. Because there is nothing better than to use the indigenous knowledge of the people for the surrounding areas to be able to augment the cause that we are trying to achieve here. And when I say hedgerow, I am not only speaking for beauty and aesthetics, I am talking food security as well. Years ago, we had an Antigua Gray pineapple project in St. Andrew, in Fruitful Hill, which aligned the side of the road as a way to mitigate the slippage. It produced some of the sweetest pineapples in Barbados. Along with that, there is the cherry tree. You will see it in the Soil Conservation Unit in St. Andrew. There are, of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, the palms and coconut trees that you can put at the side of the road. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that the hedgerow project, utilizing both horizontal and vertical root network to hold the land in place, must be a part of any project if you are serious about preventing soil erosion and degradation. It must be a part of the road built out. And I am saying, Mr. Speaker, not only are we looking at those plants for food security, but for medicinal purposes as well. You often hear about the lemongrass. A good hedgerow mitigator for soil erosion. You often hear about the vetiver or the custos grass. Again, can be used at the side of the road to prevent soil erosion. But a lot of people take the usage of vetiver for granted. Not only can it provide the horizontal network and the structures. I know there was a place in India, it was Madhya, India, one of the big forests, one of the biggest forests in India, where they found a vetiver grass and the root network was in a cascade. It had the root network was so long and so strong that it was found in the cascade. And we understand that the nitrates and phosphates from decomposing material is very, 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 very favorable for plants. But it was found over 6 feet long. And I understand the ability of the vetiver not only to help with the erosion and tighten the soil, but Mr. Speaker, sir, persons may not know, but there is a lot of carbon sequestration, not only from the leaves of plants, but in the case of vetiver, from the roots as well. So we are not only talking nitrogen fixation to remove those harmful chemicals out the earth. Because if you're serious about the survival of any race, and we are serious about mitigating our climate change, we have to understand the full usage of every single plant. And it's no secret that the Scotland district allows for 80% of our forestry not only to be involved in food security, but be able to sequester the harmful carbon dioxide as the leading greenhouse gas in the world. The forestry, the green carbon sink, must never be underestimated in its fight to remove the harmful carbon dioxide. There is no special project in Barbados. There is not even that we can compare with major countries. We don't have a recycling plant for carbon dioxide. other than its usage in the drink industry and what's not. But unless we are able to sequester it, then our fight against the vagaries of climate change could never ever be realized. And when it's talk about carbon sequestration and climate change, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. Peter, the Scotland district is not spared. We had incidents in the summertime where our temperatures increased, Mr. Speaker, sir, by 0.16 and 0.17 degrees in one day, and the next day it was the most nebulous condition that this country faced with 6 and 8 inches of rainfall. The vagaries of climate change. This is what we are faced with as a country. So when I talk about the green carbon sink and the ability to be able to sequester by using not only the forestry in the Scotland district and our ability to plant trees and allow them to serve their natural purpose, I am speaking about planting hedgerow as well to serve the dual purpose of carbon sequestration, obviously providing food, but allowing the soil to be kept in a stable condition to prevent the erosion. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the excess rainfall that we are seeing in the Scotland district, it's important to have, along with the roads, a proper well structure and well network where water, rather than being run off into the sea, another problem that we are faced with, and as Minister of the Blue Economy, I will speak to those things. But rather than allowing the runoff to the sea, Mr. Speaker, sir, we can capture it for the recharge of the aquifers. We are living in an arid state. It's no secret that Barbados is one of the 50 most, arid states in the world. Most drought-prone states in the world. We must be able to capture every single molecule of water and use it in a circular way. That is what we are talking about. So when we are talking about road network, when we are talking about infrastructure development, we can't have all these things happening unless we are able to redirect the water where it can serve its full purpose in the aquifers. The runoff, I say it is a problem for as Minister of the Blue Economy. Not only does it cause flooding and destroy a lot of our vegetation, but the runoff in the sea causes the overloading of nutrients. We have a perennial grinch called the Sargassum seaweed. A big problem, almost every beach. It's not only a deterrent for our tourists, but our biodiversity and life, our marine life as well. But one of the reasons that it has been proliferating in our oceans, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is because of the over-nutrient levels and the over-nutrient loading of the sea with the runoff waters. Those runoff waters, if they're not redirected properly with a proper infrastructure and network, they go in straight and direct into the sea, causing excess nitrates and phosphates, which are a breeding ground for the algae known as the Sargassum seaweed. Thanks to the government of Japan, we are now working with new equipment, harvesters, to be able, and crane, to be able to get the seaweed, and so it can be used and repurposed in a circular way, because we're talking circular Barbados every single thing we are saying. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that my ministry is willing, ready, and able to work with the Ministry of Transport Works Maintenance to ensure that along with putting in those new roads in St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. Peter, and all those areas, that we have a hedgerow project that can align itself for the success of this project. And I want to say that this government is invested in ensuring that the residents of St. Joseph, St. Andrew, and all those persons in rural Barbados can have a good quality of life. In the same way that how we would treat the urban Barbados, we are saying that there must be equality and that there must be equal disposal of services across the sphere of this country. That is the common will of every single member who sits in this chamber. And I'm saying that I am committed to this effort. I want to tell you that my ministry is committed to the effort to work. There's also, as I announced earlier last week, along with the Member of Parliament for St. Peter, in 6 Mains, not because he stands 6 feet tall and over, but we said in 6 Mains that we will bring a gully project, and a project that will seek to restore the gully ecosystems, a project that will allow for another touristic exercise in Barbados, a new part of the touristic drive where we are going to explore and enhance the gullies for every single purchase. And I am saying there will be not only gully cleaning and ensuring that the trails are augmented, but we are going to do taxonomy, where we are, and the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South spoke about it earlier, we are going to provide that history, that etiology, that knowledge on trees, not only because you see it and they look big and fancy, but we are going to tell you, for instance, that this baobab tree is climate resistant. It was brought to Barbados such and such time. It is pollinated by the bats at night. That's why we are to ensure that our biodiversity is able to survive the test of time. That this tree here, because of its uniqueness of roots, can allow for a habitat for the canthropes, the lizards that I love so bad, which has the ability to utilize and their visual acuity to eat the eggs and different things of the leaves in terms of the mosquitoes and what's not. These are the things that we are going to talk about when you are talking about not only the United Nations General Assembly called to enhance biodiversity by 30% by the year 2030, but I said already it must be every single Barbadian's call, because these are the things that will seek to prevent the existential threats that we are faced with. Biological diversity, and there's going to be a biological diverse action plan being exposed by myself in Parliament in the not too distant future. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this is a response to the needs of the people. We have said as a government since 2018 that our job is to ensure that the basic needs of our people are realized. Food, shelter, transportation, roads, water, those things that will make a difference to people's lives. The ability to access social services. That this government will do everything to ensure that the Barbadian dream can become a reality. And the dreams of the people in Scotland district is to have good roads, that they can drive, they can access the social services, that there is absolutely no reason why they cannot enjoy rustic Barbados, that they cannot enjoy the panoramic view of Bathsheba, where my good friend just opened up a center, that they cannot enjoy the beautiful view coming off of 6 Mains and all that area, that marine sphere, that they cannot enjoy the beautiful view of St. Thomas, where the Member of Parliament can talk about stalactites and stalagmites. These are the things that make Barbados and the country people who they are. I am saying that if you are talking about protecting this country from the vagaries of climate change and natural disaster, then rustic Barbados must be allowed to play its part. It is 80% of our forestry, I will repeat, is nestled in the parishes of the Scotland district. 80%. If we are going to have the carbon sink that is needed to sequester the carbon dioxide from our atmosphere, we must allow the growth and development of rustic Barbados. And that is as simple as it gets from me. And you can't get it more limpid than that, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, I want to commit my ministry to this effort. I want to say that there is an unequivocal gamut of what is happening in the Ministry of Transport and Works in terms of putting down the roads, and my ministry as it relates to planting the hedgerow and ensuring that there is stability at the side of the roads. And I'm saying that I want to recommit my ministry to this effort. And I want to end by saying, Mr. Speaker, that I came from St. Joseph. I know that I represent the armed philosophy of Christ Church when I get up in here. But my heart is still nestled in the fruitful hill of fruitful St. Joseph. And I want to say that as a Josephine, oftentimes when I speak, I will make no apology for saying that I still represent the interests of the good people in St. Joseph. And the equal way that I will raise my right flag and say the people who are in the geological or geographical or geospatial space of the armed philosophy of Christ Church, the good constituency of Christ Church West Central, will hear my voice in their defense as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to end off in the good words of none other than Cheryl Hackett herself when she said, the rustic Barbados must remain beautiful and unspoiled. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise in this honorable chamber in support of the resolution led by the honorable member for Christ Church East Central. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I will also like to put in the record our thanks to those who would have helped us to negotiate this loan and to have taken us where we are today. In particular, the Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. Reference was made to Dr. Kevin Greenwich, who have done considerable work on this program, and of course the Permanent Secretary and his team. Also the Public Investment Unit, and certainly the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, who would have worked closely with us in certainly when I was there as Minister responsible for Transport Works and Water Resources. It has indeed taken some time to conclude, but that is the nature of loan negotiations when you're looking to get the very best for the country. Mr. Speaker, I see this as a continuation of the government's very aggressive and expansive program of roadworks in this country. Certainly since this administration came to office, the Barbados Labour Party government has done more roadworks in this country than the other party did when they were in opposition. Indeed, there's no little or no comparison. When we saw the massive and aggressive roadworks expansion program that took place in Barbados in our last term, and by that I mean from 2018, the term 2018 to 2022, it can only be described in short as a wonderful accomplishment for a party that is very much interested in the development of people, but more particularly, a party that is interested in the development of Barbados, and a party that recognized as a government that the country could no longer continue on the path for which it was going. So I say it is credit to the Barbados Labour Party, once again leading the road in road construction and road works repairs in this country. Mr. Speaker, the 256 million, as we were told, that will be spent on roadworks in the Scotland district, and I think everybody understands the geographic region of the Scotland district. It takes into consideration St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. John, parts of St. Thomas, and parts of St. Peter. And the works, and these works that the government will be engaged in will definitely see increased levels of employment. For sure, I can tell you off the bat when it was there, that the contractors were projecting that they were going to employ more than 600 persons to be engaged on the compliant project alone in terms of road building. That has absolutely nothing to do with the increased employment opportunities that will come the way for the IADB Global Roads, as well as for the CAF Road project when that comes on stream. But what is going to be particularly important in this project as well is that there are several communities in rural Barbados who will benefit substantially from the economic benefits that will come their way. For example, you will have the shops, and you will have food outlets, and you will have other entrepreneurs within the community who will be in a position now, because you know when you or building road works or any construction site, there's always an element of local economic activity being driven in this particular area. So I see great benefits, not only for the employment, but also for the localized economies in this area. But Mr. Speaker, and certainly when I was there, and I made this point, that the road builders were encouraged to go there and recapitalize. I remember when I joined the ministry and I saw the projects that are going to be timetabled. I met with the road builders and the other construction companies in the presence of the ministry officials, and I told them that the road works program over the next couple of years will require that they will have to invest in more equipment. And fortunately, sir, they took our advice as a ministry and they went out there and recapitalized. Because I made the simple point. There is no way that 1 million pave machine will be able to do the works, the number of road works that would be required in Barbados. And they went out there, they made the capital investment, and I'm happy that they did so, because now these projects are going to come on stream, will now redound to the benefit of Barbados, but it will ensure that we will not have any projects being stalled because we have lack of equipment in Barbados. And I'm grateful for their contribution and grateful for what they did. But Mr. Speaker, one of the most significant events that would have taken place, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central in his presentation made the point about the interest rate, that the government was able to secure an interest rate at 2% for $256 million with a 5-year moratorium. But Mr. Speaker, I want to demonstrate the economic brilliance of the Barbados Labour Party's finance and economic team. And you have to do it. Mr. Speaker, if the government of Barbados were to go on the international market and negotiate a similar loan for $256 million, the interest rate certainly will not be 2%. That is why the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central made the point there's concessional financing. We would not have paid 2%. We would be looking to pay at least 5.5%. And Mr. Speaker, can I tell you what the difference would have been? 2%, Mr. Speaker, concessional rates on $256 million is only $44.5 million with a 5-year moratorium over a 20-year span. Mr. Speaker, if the government did not do that and had to go on the international market and pay 5.5%, this government would have been faced with a situation where it would have had to pay $153.6 million in interest. So the simple point that I'm making to the Honourable Chamber and beyond is that thanks to the economic leadership within the Ministry of Finance, the government of Barbados, were it not for those skills, could have found itself in a situation where it would have been paying $109 million in interest rate. That speaks to the economic leadership of the country. A savings of over $109 million were we not to go on the market at this point in time. And what is that equivalent to per year, Mr. Speaker? That is equivalent to approximately $5.4 million in savings per year. But can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, with the fiscal space that would have been created, what $109 million can do now, Mr. Speaker, for roadworks? But if we don't have that space, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast will not be in a position to roll out the CAF road program, because the savings alone that we received will allow this country to continue on its rather aggressive and expansive roadworks program. And there's no better money to be spent when you're spending money on capital expenditure, because you have wider reach, Mr. Speaker, and it is money that will have a long-term beneficial relationship to the country, Mr. Speaker. And I thought it was necessary, sir, to highlight that point. So it tells you that the Barbados Labour Party government continues to lead the path in terms of its economic guidance, its economic leadership. And I want to assure the country of Barbados that notwithstanding the charge about debt, that when you have a team that can negotiate and can negotiate the best terms for debt, Mr. Speaker, that is what makes the difference. The difference between companies, and Mr. Speaker, I think we have to, and we've reached a point. We cannot be afraid of debt, Mr. Speaker. If not for debt, we could not have built out this country. But we are doing so in a responsible way. And we are not engaging in interest rates like the previous administration engaged in. We are exercising great fiscal restraint and control. And again, Mr. Speaker, that is the difference between this Barbados Labour Party and the other party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the rationale, I think, is clear. We have a situation where the roads in rural Barbados must be attended to. And the clear strategy, the clear rationale behind going for the Exim Bank loan is to ensure that the Scotland district roads that were suffering for some time will be upgraded. The roads and bridges in those areas were deteriorating, and the government found the response in respect of a Scotland district program. The government didn't stop there. The government recognized that you have to continue in the rural areas of Barbados and build out the road infrastructure, and the government took the appropriate policy initiative and elected, Mr. Speaker, to go for a CAF loan. And that is why I made reference to the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, who would have worked hard with the ministry at the time, MTW, and would have also worked hard within the PI Public Investment Unit, and would have certainly in our own Ministry of Economic Affairs would have done a lot of work in order to help us advance the program. And the government recognized it because, truth be told, when you look at road works, especially in rural areas, based on the length of the road, you have to spend more money by extension because of the length of the road. But then when you have to think about drainage and where utility services have to be restored, then you have to spend the money. And the government took the correct policy approach to ensure that they borrow enough money to build out the Scotland district and other rural areas where there is a critical need for roadworks improvement. And it gives me absolute joy to see that this project will be coming to fruition and to see that the pipeline of projects that we have in the government will continue to benefit the people of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, the issue of land slippage. And this is, and you know, sometimes people complain that roadworks might take a bit longer. But let me explain something, Mr. Speaker. And I only spent about, 15 months or so in MTW, but I learned a lot in that short period of time. But if you are going into the Scotland district, you have to make sure that you test the soil. You have to do all the boreholes that are necessary, because you have to ensure, the engineers that is, that when they design a road, that the road will last for a defined period of time. And if you don't know the soil type, if you don't know the quality that you're working with, you could find yourself in a position of compromise. The government took the approach to engage in proper engineers for engineering designs to ensure that when the designs are applied to the road works, you will not have any reputational damage issues arising, so that the people in the Scotland district can be rest assured that when those roads are finished, they will have longevity to the hilt. And I say that under the best guidance and advice, Mr. Speaker. The other issue, and let me say this as well, that within the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources, I made this point when we were building out, when we were reconstructing Highway 1. There's no other association or group of individuals that I know in Barbados that knows more about road building and road construction than the professional engineers within the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. And I know that, Mr. Speaker, they have done it year upon year. But I also want to make the point that in the same Scotland district, in St. Andrew, and the Honourable Member St. Andrew knows this. I believe it's Springvale Road. This Springvale Road, Mr. Speaker, was designed and was managed by the current Deputy Chief Technical Officer. I didn't ask you his permission to call his name, but I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that you would object if I were to call into his name to record. Mr. Philip Tudor. And Mr. Tudor designed and developed the Springvale Road. And if you go down there today, Mr. Speaker, you don't see any damage, any severe damage after about 30 years. So that when I tell you that within the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, they have some of the best engineering brains unmatched in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, I don't say so in a vacuum. I say so because they have been tried, proven, and tested to the point where their works stand up in Barbados. So I have absolutely no fear about the quality of the engineering designs and the quality of the road works that we are likely to have at the end of the project within the Scotland District. Mr. Speaker, I also want to make the point that when we complete the Scotland District program, it is something I think as a government we have to look at, and we have to look at the next phase. And the next phase, Mr. Speaker, has to be creating more accessible points and more exit points within that loop within the Scotland District. It is something that I recognize that we have to do. I also recognize it when we're certainly doing phase 1 of Highway 1, that on these roads and highways, sometimes there are few exit points. And it is something we can't do it right away because of the scarcity of resources. And we have to apply the resources where we need them urgently. But at some point, in terms of our rebuilding and relooking or retooling our road works, our road network in Barbados, we have to look and see how best we can do it. I think it is instructive. I think it is appropriate. And therefore, I will wish that in terms of our future planning, we have an opportunity to look at these things. Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to be long. Like I said, I wanted to support the resolution, not because I serve as a former Minister of Transport and Works and Water Resources, but because I believe that this project is the right project and the right policy prescription for the people within the Scotland District. I also want to take the opportunity, as I've said before, to compliment the government for continuing the CAF project and also the IADB Global Roads program. Those roadworks are absolutely necessary. When you look at the infrastructure over the years, you have to fix and you have to restore the infrastructure. We have to rehabilitate roads. And I cannot stop, Mr. Speaker, by once again commending the Prime Minister and her economic team, commending the Honourable Member for Christchurch Central for getting there and others for negotiating the best possible rates for Barbados so that the savings that will redound to us on the interest rate had we gone out to borrow at this time would have cost us even more money. In other words, the monies that we would have otherwise had to pay out will create the additional fiscal space for us now to continue to build out the capital works program in Barbados. And I want to say I wish the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East the best, because I know, and I went through it, and I know it can be very, very taxing. Highway 1 took sometimes a lot of energy away from you. And I know what she has to undergo will not be easy in terms of all these roadworks projects. But I know that her heart is in the right place and that she will do best. She will do the best for Barbados. So, Mr. Speaker, on that note, I want to say that to the people within the Scotland District and other rural parts of Barbados who have been waiting for some time, yes, it has been long in coming. Yes, the negotiations took longer than planned, but at the end of the day, your government went out there, got the best deal for Barbados so that you, the beneficiaries of the roads, and also the taxpayers of Barbados can sit back and say, well done, thou good and faithful servants to the Barbados Labour Party. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noticed the hour of the day, so I don't intend to be long, and I really didn't intend to speak, but listening to the many speeches, I thought I wanted to make a contribution. I really wanted to say, on behalf of the City of Bridgetown, congratulations to the Scotland District, because a lot of people believe, and some have said it on the floor, that there seems to be this artificial divide between urban Barbados and rural Barbados, but I was never a member, sir, of an urban Barbados or a rural Barbados, but now the Republic of Barbados. I believe in one Barbados. And I've received some messages from those I conducted a project with in the same Scotland district, and they have sent me some points to be their voice here this afternoon, this evening, sir. So I just want to make a short contribution in that regard. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West spoke about the delayed project, and he spoke about 3 years. But the whole development of the Scotland district goes back way, way before that. I remember seeing something called the Scotland Development Plan brought to me over on the other side by River Road for a program we were doing, a radio program, and the pages were getting a little yellow, and the pages were definitely dusty. So the whole idea of the Scotland development goes way, way back. I am proud, sir, to be part of an administration that brings the plan from the paper and brings the plan where the rubber hits the road figuratively and literally, sir. Sir, we are about to build out what was known as the breadbasket of Barbados now in a substantial way. And like the last speaker spoke about, I believe that we should do it in a comprehensive way. I believe that this is an opportunity not just to build roads, because as the Prime Minister likes to say, and she's absolutely correct, this government has to be transformative. We can no longer be just about roads. We have to be about the ecosystem. We have to be about drainage. We have to be about people, but we also have to be about projects and investment. I believe that this is an opportunity, sir, for us to build out our ecotourism, our heritage tourism, our medical tourism. I can see, sir, I see visions. Or if I want to borrow from a popular gentleman, I have a dream. I have a dream of electric ATVs, safari trips, camping tours, retreats, all now in the Scotland district because the off-road is no longer on the on-road. The on-road now can now be traversed by ordinary vehicles, and we can have off-road trails like what we're now having up by Harrison Cave, because it is time that when we think of Barbados, we no longer have this linear or narrow vision. We must now start to think big, act big, develop big, invest big, and make Barbados big for all of its residents, sir. And that is what this project and this resolution today is for me. It is not just about the repairing of the much-needed roads to be repaired in the constituencies that cover the broad area called the Scotland District. The Honourable Finance Minister spoke about the medical specialty of Barbados. And we can go back to, and I think it was the Honourable Member for St. Peter, we can go back to George Washington and many centuries ago. All of these things must combine now with our confidence in the 21st century for us to make these investments and make them in a way, sir, that we can see this as productive debt. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South spoke about that. And I want to add on to what he was saying, sir, in terms of the fact that Barbadians, and I would like the Honourable Member dealing with the financial literacy and the financial education to press the gas on that. Because a lot of Barbadians do not understand money, they do not understand investment, and therefore a lot of them have to live in poverty. What is bad debt? Bad debt is different to getting in debt that is bad. There's productive debt and there's unproductive debt. When you can take a loan such as this, finance, like the Honourable Health Minister taught, 2%, and build out in a way that people can now trade their goods between the city and the country, that we can have tourists coming here and not only having to stay on the Platinum Coast, but they can enjoy the whole coast of Barbados. This is what I call productive debt. Debt that allows us that after repaying it, we make more than we borrow. Because a lot of members that spoke today, you are correct. A lot of Barbadians are concerned about the debt because they don't understand debt. And I believe it is important for each of us in here to help the Barbadian public understand what is productive debt, what is good debt, and what is foolish debt. Foolish debt is not anything you see around here anymore, sir. They had a lot of foolish debt around here before. The honorable members for the finance minister spoke about 12, 13, 14%. Now that is what I consider foolish debt, sir. But anyhow, sir, there's another point I want to make, because I want to make just a brief contribution. The other point that I believe that is important is that as we go on and make these major developments, that we consider not just the technical expertise, but the local expertise. That we consult with the locals in these areas. Far too many times, government around the world, this is nothing peculiar to Barbados, we get involved with the intellectualism of technicalities and engineers, which I respect 100%, sir. But that local knowledge, there's a word that many here might not want to hear. Actually, they will not hear it because I changed my mind from speaking about it. But I just implore those working on the projects, the technical experts, to understand the landscape that they're dealing with, understand the many springs, the many caves, the many various aspects of the Scotland district when we are making these major developments. Sir, a word to the wise is sufficient. Now, sir, when I think about a project such as this, again, I want to reiterate, I don't see the separation between town and country. I believe that those in the country that may cry from the concrete jungle or the smog, that they should be able to traverse into the country and get some fresh air. And I believe that those that live in the country should be able to take a nice, cool drive down to the city to ply their crops. We in this country encourage, and rightfully so, Barbadians to look further afield, like Guyana and Suriname, to make their agricultural investments. But I believe that just here home in the Scotland district, the breadbasket of Barbados can be such a place that persons can make their investment in the breadbasket of home. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about food and nutrition security, we cannot run to Guyana to harvest. We cannot run to Suriname to harvest. But I am sure that we can trade with our neighbors just short in the Scotland district to ensure that we have something to eat. Because food comes first. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is really important for us to understand that the times that we are in, and that we start to connect the dots and understand that the Scotland district can make a dent and can make an impact on the cost of living that we are seeing in this country. A lot of the times, a lot of the things that we like to eat is imported. And most of the time imported at a lower cost. But if we can increase production in this country of certain goods, I believe that this can make an impact on cost of living in this country. It is for this reason that I believe that all Barbadians, regardless of if they represent or live in urban or rural Barbados, that they support this resolution on the floor of Parliament this afternoon into the evening, sir. Because this is a project that will benefit Barbados. This is a project that will benefit Barbados in many ways. I spoke about the agriculture, I spoke about the adventure, the ecotourism, and the mere fact that it is a place where when you go, you see 360 degrees of beauty. It is a place that must be preserved, and it is a place that must be developed. Even on the point of tourism, I always used to wonder, how can we maximize the use of our entertainment ambassador, Rihanna, for tourism benefits? Because our tourism product for a very long time was made up of persons coming back to Barbados 20 and 30 years. The persons that Rihanna would more appeal to are really, let's be honest, of a younger generation. And if we want to use her to bring people to Barbados, there must be things here in Barbados that would attract that age group to the tourism product of Barbados. And that can be done in the Scotland district. So I'm imploring all members of the chamber to think big, to think transformational in developing areas like the Scotland District to ensure that it is not just about a road, Mr. Speaker, but it is about development and investment into this nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, I promise, and I will deliver my promise, that I will only make a small, but what I consider to be an important contribution to the resolution at hand. And I ask that we support this resolution, and I give this resolution my full support. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, the honour is mine to have been asked by the, got applause from outside the chamber. Wow. The Minister of Finance has asked me, I suppose now as the elder statesman for the Scotland District, to wrap up this debate. I have to say that it is an honor, but when people start referring to you as the elder statesman, you perhaps begin to worry a little. I accept, though, his honor, his offer, and his compliment. Much has been said today that has warmed my heart as the Member of Parliament for St. Joseph. This has been a fight for me from the day I first got elected to represent the constituency of St. Joseph. But of all the speeches that I've heard today, and they were all fine and powerful speeches, the speech just ended by the member for the city is the one that resonates most with me. This debate is not about, or should not be about roads, but should be about development. Mr. Speaker, some of you in this chamber would have heard me say before that the constituency of St. Joseph is made up of the parish of St. Joseph, but it also includes part of St. Andrew, part of St. Thomas, part of St. George, and part of St. John. And I've taken the trouble to explain to many people over the years why the constituency of St. Joseph is really an amalgam of 5 different parishes. And it is quite simple. Under our constitutional provisions, every constituency must fall in terms of its voters, in terms of the number of electors, within a particular range. I think the current figure is about 7,000 or so voters, 7,000 or so electors. Over time, and there was a time, certainly in my memory, when the constituency of St. Joseph was defined by the parish boundaries. But over time, Josephines moved out. This is not a phenomenon that is solely a St. Joseph phenomenon. There was a time when Barbadians left Barbados and went to England. For generation after generations, people left the country and moved to town. Our reality, though, has been, Mr. Speaker, that in recent decades, the degree of, I don't want to say deprivation, but the degree to which the conditions in rural Barbados were allowed to deteriorate posed a strong push factor which caused many residents, not just of St. Joseph, but also of St. Andrew, parts of St. John, St. Peter, and St. Lucy, and perhaps even parts of St. Thomas, to look for more accommodating pastures in other parts of Barbados. That has been our reality. People moved to town because it was easier to get to work if you lived near town, because we didn't have a lot of buses. In recent times, Mr. Speaker, and you would have hoped that the approach of government to rural Barbados would have seen some modification before now. And I've had the privilege now of serving in two administrations. I served as Minister of Industry and International Business and then as Attorney General between 2003 and 2008 under former Prime Minister, now deceased, Owen Arthur. And Mr. Arthur was passionate about the Scotland District. And he sat with me on many occasions, and in our last discussions, we agreed that we would enact a new Scotland District Authority Act, which would bring new life to the management of the development process in the Scotland District. And I praised Mr. Arthur for what at the time seemed to me to be a brave move, because he said he was going to put $15 million dedicated to nothing more than the rehabilitation of the Scotland District. I was the fussiest man in the world going into the 2008 election. Every night I talked about this $15 million. We lost the election, and now the figure is $256 million. I have come to accept that Mr. Arthur, despite his generous heart and despite the advice he was given, severely underestimated what it would take to adequately restore the Scotland District to pride of place. But at least as far back as 2007, 2008, our then Prime Minister recognized that something serious had to be done about the Scotland District of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, there's a road, and I don't even know if I should call it a road. There's a passage in St. Joseph that we call the Spa Hill. Spa Hill used to be a road. When I took the former Minister of Public Works, who spoke a few minutes ago, down through the Spa Hill, he said he thought that when he toured St. John, that he had seen bad roads, that he had no idea that there was a place in Barbados like the Spa. Now, Mr. Speaker, when I got elected for the first time in 2003, I petitioned the staff at Public Works and said, we got to fix the Spa. Fix it. And I was told by the officials, it will cost too much money to fix the Spa. It is cheaper to move out the people. And I petitioned them about Fruitful Hill, and I was told it will cost too much money to fix Fruitful Hill. It is cheaper to move out the people. And I began to see a thread in the thinking of officialdom. Their focus, regrettably, was not about restoring rural Barbados, but by finding the path of least resistance and just relocate people. And I tried to explain to them, Mr. Speaker, that the notion of relocating people in circumstances like that is one that we must rebel and rail against. Mr. Speaker, there are parts of my constituency not properly served by roads, but rich in history, Mr. Speaker. There's a family, I can see their faces. They said to me, my great-grandparents went to Panama and sent back the money to buy this land. But the attitude of officialdom was, it was cheaper to move out the people. Do you know what that would mean, Mr. Speaker? That the inheritance of a family that was created out of labor in Panama, that those people would have had to abandon it and left it there. Walk away from it and go, Mr. Speaker, and live in Kingsland or West Terrace. Lovely places they are, but you can't find a coconut tree or a barefoot tree. You might find a mango tree, but the air that you breathe will more than likely be blessed with the smell of gasoline.
there was something in my mind that was philosophically wrong with telling people, abandon your heritage because it is cheaper than fix the road. And it follows from that, Mr. Speaker, that when you rip these people out of these rural communities and send them to live in the surrounding, the peri-urban areas, I think they call it, you know what happens, Mr. Speaker? The small church at the top of Melvin's Hill that perhaps has a congregation of about 30 on a good Sunday, maybe 40, will find that its church members will have moved. So the church begins to die. And the shop that relied on that population the shop that served that population and relied on that population to sustain the owner and his family, without his customers, because they too will have gone and live in Kingsland. Sorry, they never wrong with Kingsland, you know. I don't want to create that impression. But I'm just trying to make the point that they will have left and gone to live in other areas, and then the shop begins to die. Thank you very much. There are schools in my constituency now. I remember going to one of the graduations. You know how many people were in the graduation class for that primary school that particular year? 8 students. And the former Minister of Education, acting Prime Minister, will be able to speak of the struggle that they have had in trying to work out what do we do with these schools when the population starts to decline because the parents bypass neighborhood schools and send the children to places, I don't want to call them schools, but you know what happens. So the schools begin to die too. And so the communities begin to die, Mr. Speaker. Instead of the constituency of St. Joseph being limited to its parish boundaries, we've had to bring in a swath of St. Andrew and grab up some of them and come around into St. John. It is about development. Barbados can ill afford, through injudicious decisions on the part of its administration, to allow our rural societies to dwindle. I was born and bred in St. George. The Deputy Prime Minister has roots in St. John. And others of us have all benefited in some way from having a heritage, a noble heritage that started, Mr. Speaker, deep within rural Barbados. And I have always vowed that if nothing else I could see happen in St. Joseph, it had to be that we restore St. Joseph to the dignity and honor that it once held. And so this $256 million, yes, it is to fix roads, but it is to address a deeper fundamental problem, sir. Because the rural parts of Barbados have long felt that they were not the beneficiaries of a fair share of the national pie. And rightly so. Rightly so. It wasn't just a question of having to change your shocks. Mr. Speaker, for much of the last 4 or 5 years, St. Joseph has been a place without water. I well recollect one of my constituents telling me that he was between a rock and a hard place, Mr. Speaker. He had a house in Sugar Hill. He couldn't find a tenant for it. Lovely house, but the boy wanted to rent it. The boy wanted to rent it because they ain't renting the house that every morning they got to go with 2 and 3 buckets to catch water. Mr. Speaker, you can rent a house, they ain't got the water. He can't sell it neither, because nobody wanted to buy it. Part of Horse Hill
The last administration handed down an edict. No construction work, no building at all could take place in that particular area. But what about the families who are raising children and who would have hoped to build a house in those areas? What are they going to do? They've got to move and go elsewhere. We talk about 1/7 of our landmass. Mr. Speaker, it is more than 1/7 of our landmass. The rural parts of Barbados, the Minister of the Environment spoke about the lungs. I don't think he used that language, but the lungs of Barbados are located in our rural communities. Have you ever seen a road, Mr. Speaker, that ain't get drive on for 6 months? You know what happens? The grass begins to eaten at the side and the little crack in the middle. Then you see a little twig, a little something beginning to grow there. And a year later, it looked like it gone back to nature. We cannot, Mr. Speaker, abandon rural Barbados. It is as much a part of who we are, it is as much a part of our history, it is as much a part of our very essence. And equally so with any other part of our country. It is where we enjoy the loveliest of vistas, where we enjoy the freshest of air, the finest of fruit, the best almost of everything that this country has to offer. And I am proud to be part of an administration that has taken the brave and courageous step to say, so far and no further will we allow this situation to persist. For the first time in our history, Mr. Speaker, rural Barbados, and in particular the Scotland district, is receiving its fair share of the national pipe. We have worked assiduously on the water problem. It isn't quite licked, but for the most part, Mr. Speaker, for the most part, my constituency and parts of St. John, St. Thomas, and St. Andrew have running water on a daily basis, and that job is not yet finished. We have seen parts of the infrastructure, a refurbished outpatient clinic in Belle Plaine, a refurbished outpatient clinic, Mr. Speaker, in Horse Hill. We are completing a 1.5 million gallon reservoir in Castle Grant. The apple of my eye, Mr. Speaker, has been the park and civic center that we've just reopened in Bathsheba. All of these are serving to tell the people of rural Barbados, this administration cares about you and about your livelihood, Mr. Speaker. This is not a political exercise. This is a people-centered exercise. Mr. Speaker, $256 million. I wish it could have been 500. But this $256 million, as I understand it, will do in the region of 20 major roads in St. Joseph. And the SPAW, Mr. Speaker, the place that Public Works said to me back in 2005, it is going to cost too much to fix, better to move out the people. The SPAW, Mr. Speaker, is going to be finished. Melvins Hill Bridge is going to be replaced, Mr. Speaker. These are all things that have been the corn in the shoes of rural Barbados. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it has been hard. It has been hard for me to look my constituents in the eye and say, we're going to do this. You know why? They say, but Mr. Marshall, except for when Maisie Barker was in the House of Assembly, the Barbados Labour Party representing St. Joseph. So who are you to complain that we ain't got no water? Who are you to complain that the roads need fixing? And I don't have an argument for that, you know. I don't have a response for that. I have none. I weakly said sometimes, but you know, we've been in opposition for the last 10 years. But that offered no satisfaction because as far as they were concerned, the constituency of St. Joseph, save for one term, was represented by this party. So I claim that $256 million, sir, not in my own name, but in the name of all of those Barbados Labour Party members of Parliament that represented the constituency of St. Joseph before me. Because I know that they would have loved to have done it. But I just told you that Owen Arthur said, I'm going to dedicate $15 million to do it. And it's 256. But Mr. Speaker, it is going to be the best $256 million that this country ever spent. Because when, you know, already people have begun to come to Bathsheba to visit certain things. And I know that there are places in St. Andrew that the member for St. Andrew wants them to visit, and St. Thomas and so on. We need to reopen rural Barbados for business. We need to reopen rural Barbados for living. We need to reopen rural Barbados for the enjoyment of all Barbadians, sir. But in the same way that in the United States, they had to build highways to open up the West, we are rebuilding highways, sir, to open up our East. This is about people's ability to stay in the places where the navel string is buried and to raise a new generation of Barbadians in the safety and security of St. Joseph Village life. And I am happy for that, Mr. Speaker. I hope that in the next 4 years, and there will always be delays, but I ask my constituents and all of Barbados to be a little tolerant of the inconveniences. You cannot spend almost $60 million in 4 years and not have inconvenience. But that 4 years will go by quickly. It will go by quickly. And we will see member for St. Andrew, Coggins Hill. I know, at a point following the bus, the city stopped to find Coggins Hill. And for any of you who try that formula, I think you can be driving around the countryside till tomorrow. But if it works for some St. Michael MPs, that's all right. It wouldn't work for me. But Coggins Hill and numerous other places that are now the bane of our existence, sir. Because in every single one of those communities, these people say to you, I know they say to you in St. Andrew, you can find piece of land from someplace else. Can't take this no more. Can't take it no more. The buses can't pass. There are parts of my constituency, Mr. Speaker, that sanitation trucks cannot get to, but people live down there. How do you tell a family to be careful of your hygiene when the nearest garbage collection point from you is 100 meters up a hill and you have to navigate? You have to navigate, that's all I can say. But sanitation truck can't get to them, so what do you think to do with the garbage, sir? And can you blame them? You can't blame them. It's about development. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what I need to say much more. This has been my soapbox for all of my political career. But to be a part of an administration that at our most difficult of times recognizes that we can no longer pay lip service to the people of rural Barbados, and I'm a politician, those people in rural Barbados supported this party going and coming. MPs for St. Andrew benefited from that support. St. Thomas, St. John is a newcomer, but they can stay. And the time has come to pay the price of that loyalty. And I'm proud to stand in the chamber to support a resolution to borrow this money. My constituency will benefit, for sure. But to the extent that the entire Scotland district is going to be transformed, these are areas that will be opened up again, and we will see shops springing up again. Not just shops, MP for St. Andrew, restaurants. Because that is where people want to come and relax and enjoy. Barbadians in our constituency will be employed again, and they will build homes again and raise families again. That is what being in government is about. And I, sir, support this resolution, and thank you for your time. Beg to move, Mr. Speaker, that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Mr. Speaker, we revert to messages from His Excellency, the Acting President.
I am in receipt of a message from the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Douglas Gibson, Acting President. His Excellency, the Acting President, to the Honourable, the House of Assembly. I wish to inform the Honourable, the House of Assembly, that with the approval of the Honourable Prime Minister, it is proposed that in accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution of Barbados, I will continue to perform the functions of the office of the President from the 19th June to 27th of June 2022. I further wish to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that in accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution, I will continue to perform the functions of the office of the President for the period 19th June to 27th June 2022, signed Acting President.
Government business reverted.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting, and I therefore beg to move the suspension of the House until, the adjournment of the House until next Tuesday at 10 a.m. on the 28th of June. Sorry, at 1 p.m., sir. 1:30. The members of this House will no doubt be attending the official funeral of Mr. Joseph Tudor, and therefore we are asking for the sitting to be at 1:30.
The question is that this Honourable Chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 28th day of June, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 20th day of June, 2022 at 1:30 p.m.